Hello and welcome to Yes, California, uh, Calexit Congress every single Sunday morning live at 11, where we discuss the important issues of California and its future. In fact, we claim it's the most important conversation that Californians can have. What if America continues to become destabilized, or it's just better and California has to go its own? We certainly lived through 4 years of the Trump administration where we saw the worst aspects of American disintegration. And a lot of Californians became viscerally aware that the idea that they may have to go it alone is a real possibility, especially with the pandemic and the not following any federal guidance and realizing we were on our own and we were going to get ourselves out of it or we were going to literally die. A lot of people saw that. A lot of people lived through that. Then they followed through with a coup on January 6th, where they saw the capital of the country that's supposed to be the most secure in the world. They were told overwhelmed by rioters. And the flag of a defeated army was waved inside the Capitol. That was also visceral and alarming for Californians. And so over the last year, they saw the federal government completely fail during an emergency where life and death was there. And then they saw the federal government completely fail to protect itself. Now, a lot of people place the blame on Trump, sure. But that was the entire federal system failing under one man 2 times in a row. It makes it a reasonable debate to have. You don't have to agree with the conclusions, as we already have here, but you do have to recognize that when you're on a ship and it's sinking, it's probably a good time to think about building a life raft, or at least having that discussion. We can fast forward to now, and everybody says everything's great, Joe Biden's here, but in fact it is not. We'll get to that in a little bit. We are seeing a rise of Joe Biden policies that perfectly match Donald Trump's policies. In fact, Jacobin magazine, a super left, progressive, not Fox News, super left progressive magazine, said, quotes, while the last 100 days of Trump and the first 100 days of Biden are indistinguishable. That's from a super lefty magazine. They were talking about border control. But we can also look at the show Rising. And I believe her name is Crystal. And she's another lefty, super progressive person, went on Tucker Carlson, told him to go F himself. Left people love him. And this week, Crystal on the show Rising, again, another progressive, said, I can't tell the difference between Joe Biden and Trump. She was talking about harassing reporters. So 2 different issues. People on the left saying, what's the difference between these 2 guys? And we had been pointing that out here. That is a continuation of the policy of Trump that we can't live with. And it's going right through the next administration, which means the idea that we might not be able to get the government that we want being attached to America is a real possibility. And people think, hey, it's all over. But the fact is that the CDC and the federal government issued guidance on masks saying you don't need to wear them anymore. And California's first response was, we'll do what we think's right, and eventually we might agree with you in the later future. That's exactly how they talked to Donald Trump. They literally told Joe Biden and the federal government this week, we don't care what your guidance is on masks, we do what we please. That's how they behaved to Donald Trump. So we can see a continuation of the problems that existed with the federal government that spurred this conversation before continuing unabated in a perfect stream. And we can also see Californians continuing the behavior of saying we're basically independent from you. In fact, my stepfather, who isn't, he's an ex-vet, he's not big on California becoming independent. Even he pointed out, yeah, that's kind of like California saying we're a country and we don't care what you do. So it's obvious and the signs are still there. We have a great show for you today. A lot of things have been going on. A lot of people are doing activism. We are an activist-based organization, and we are principally progressive, about 85%, although we do have a few conservatives because we're trying to reach out to American conservatives and say it's time for a peaceful divorce. So let's get into the show. Okay. So a lot of great developments this week. We made ABC 7 News report on a recall candidate. We did another video on Biden is just like Trump, and we got some media response from that. We did a video with the Pomo of California on Tule elk, and we also have a joint promotional video with Baja, and we have released the announcement of the recall candidates debate. So we just made ABC 7 television talking about our recall candidates. By the way, a lot of talking points for Calexit were broadcast live on one of the largest stations in one of the largest cities here in California, by the way. Nobody contradicted our points at all. Secondly, we have another great video. We got some publicity pointing out how Biden and Trump are alike, at least on 19 policies. We released that video last week, and now we have an additional 5 policies that just came out afterwards where Biden and Trump are exactly the same. Say what you will, but these guys are doing a lot of the exact same stuff. Then we also have a video with Jelena Acosta and the Pomo on Tule elk and raising Tule elk for their area. That was a great event. The Pomo Indigenous were very pleased that Yes California reached out to them and worked with them. And Yes California is very pleased to continue our work on reaching out to California Indigenous as we started in 2017, suggesting that all federal land be returned to them. Additionally, we've been working with the Baja Independence Movement, a bunch of Baja Mexicans. And we have a joint promotional video with them, which we'll show you. And finally, we have announced our recall debate, and we have 5 candidates confirmed with additional 2 who may show up, and we'll get into that in a second. Let's go to some public comments real quick. Oh, and we have an update from Jason Wright, which we're going to get to real quick before we even start that. Oh, yes, and we have an update from Jack B. Jack B sent us a news article about 5 Oregon counties want to secede. We'll cover that here in a second. Thank you, Jack B. Adam Kokesh. Hey, Adam, how you doing? How you doing?
Outstanding. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late, Marcus. Thanks for putting us together today.
No. And thanks for agreeing to interview Louis Marinelli, the candidate. I really think it's going to be a way to get a lot of publicity for your show. Conservatives are very aware of fake news in a way that liberals aren't. And Yes California is possibly the only liberal organization that was fake newsed, as they call it. We were saying progressive things and we got treated fake news style. So Louis would like to highlight that. And we think, you're a well-known conservative. You have a huge reach, right? We think that's something conservatives will hit. And we think when they do that, they'll see it on your show, and we think other conservatives will pick up on that. So we think a lot of publicity is coming. We just made ABC stuff. Yeah.
Just turn off my hotspot while I was on.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into the story from Jack B. Jack B, if you want to feed comments in, I will post them. And then we're going to go to Jason Wright, and then we'll go from there. So Jack, once again, Adam, thanks for coming out. Jack B sent us this article. Let me share that right now. And then we'll take a few comments from anybody.
Support. If you are new to our channel, I invite you to tap that subscribe button down below and hit the notification bell to be the first to know when news breaks. And remember, in this age of censorship, that you can always access Next News Network ad-free with bonus content.
Okay.
Left-wing politics support them. You that citizens there didn't like 100 days of riding a moving. Voters in Malheur, Sherman, Grant, Baker, and Lake counties all approved measures that would require county officials to take steps to promote moving the Idaho border west to incorporate their population. They joined 2 other rural counties, Jefferson and Union, whose voters approved measures promoting move to Idaho last year. The local measures are backed by Move Oregon's Border for a Greater Idaho, a local organization that wants to go Idaho west and south for the some counties in Oregon.
Okay, so there's 5 Oregon counties, and they want to secede and form their own state. Now, part of the interesting thing here is that includes the northern part of California, what's known as here in California as Jefferson. And there is some interest, as best as I can tell, about Jefferson wanting to be part of the Greater Idaho movement. The thing is that they don't typically mention that they can't do that unless they get permission from the rest of California to leave. So you can't join Greater Idaho unless you get a majority of the population of California to allow you to go. Just like if California wants to leave, we have to get a majority of what's called the host or home government to allow us to go. So same thing with Jefferson. They don't like mentioning it. But this is an idea that's popular, and they are secessionists. Now, they're hardcore right-wing Trump-loving secessionists. Generally, I've talked to them, met a few of them. And I also interviewed some people from the Oregon Steam Rebellion or whatever it was called. So it is good that this is happening because it shows people talking about secession. Whenever people talk about secession, they talk about all forms of independence. And so that's always good for keeping it in the, viscerally around. Let's see here. Audio sucks. Okay. Let me turn up the mic.
Could I point something
please.
out real quick?
Yeah.
I find it interesting, not like, good or bad, just interesting, noteworthy that we did reach out to Jefferson folks for quite some time. And we were kind of like, in the spirit of, hey, we're all Californians, even though we disagree on some things, we still agree on a lot of stuff. Can't we all do this together and stay together? They were at that point pushing for like some sort of independence and then to be made into a state. And we kind of helped clarify for them that under international law, that's not actually legal. They would have no legal precedent for it because they were never a nation. Like the state of Jefferson was never its own nation. And so then a few years later, all of a sudden they want to join Idaho. And I'm seeing this map that looks like, wow, that's got to be a lot of people wanting to join Idaho, right? But really, just the Jefferson folks, just the California part of it, right? They're like 250 to 350 people total that support that movement. That is nowhere near enough to get any sort of sway. And it's kind of a large chunk for that few of people supporting it to do some radical move like that. Now, I say radical move like that, and some folks might say, well, gee, Calexit, isn't your move a radical move? And sure, you could say it's a little bit radical, maybe less radical since we've got hundreds of thousands of people. But, I just find it very interesting that, you look at it, the map graphic, and it looks like something big. But really, when you look at the numbers, the people that are supporting it, it doesn't really seem to have that much support.
Any other comments from anyone? Okay, then we will, let's see here, we got some comments here. Jack B says you got to start somewhere. True, you do have to start somewhere. I don't think, yes, and small movements grow into big things. Jason has a point though. What is the population of this combined area? So it's largely the state of Idaho, and then all of that landmass is largely the eastern portions of Oregon and Washington. So I'd encourage everybody to look at population maps, and you'll see that most of the population of Oregon and Washington is only concentrated on the coast and cities, and then it's highly, highly, highly rural and very dispersed throughout the rest. So they've taken the large swaths of the country that are really distributed at a low population density and added those into Idaho. And then they took a little bit of California and put it in there. So Jason's right. We're looking at gigantic swaths of territory, but how densely populated is the majority of Idaho out of Coeur d'Alene, right? And that the Idaho Valley, and how densely populated is Oregon and Washington once you leave the Portland, Seattle, I-5 corridor. It drops off. So large amounts of territory and a lot of people. I'm in the Washington area, maybe. So Jack, you could tell us, like, how dense is it? Like, is it, big cities and major cities every, couple miles, or is it, small rural cities with you have to drive a few miles to run into the next person? Anyways, it plays into account when we talk about if this is going to happen, because you have to have a good majority of the population to actually vote for these things to do. And if I'm not mistaken, Oregon and Washington, they can't break off from Oregon and Washington unless they get the majority of Oregon and Washington to say that they can. So you got a subsection of the state saying, we want to leave. Okay. Jack B says, hell no, it's rural. Exactly. So it's very rural, and that's nothing wrong with that. I'm from the Central Valley. It's very rural too. I live in Fresno City, but the rest of it's very rural, and that's great. I'm just saying that, Fresno City has a huge population. The rest of the rural area doesn't. So are you going to be able to get the votes when you're talking about a fourth of the population of Oregon convincing 3/4 to go, and a fourth of the population of Washington convincing 3/4 of Washington to go? And Jefferson, with, as Jason was saying, 200,000 people maybe in that whole area combined, is going to convince.
No, not 200,000. 250 to 350.
Okay. 250
Yeah.
to 350 people total in that
That support the Jefferson movement.
I hear you. So small amounts of people in the Jefferson area, tiny, going to convince this much Californians, hey, let us go. That's basically the idea. Everything has a catch-22. So what's the catch-22? The catch-22 is that they are making a lot of steam talking about how they want to form Greater Idaho, and they have the governor of Idaho saying that's cool. But none of this goes anywhere unless you have a majority of the population of Oregon and Washington and California say that it's okay for those sections of their states to break away. If you don't have that, you're going nowhere. Additionally, what we know is that these eastern sections of Oregon and Washington are very conservative, and that's fine. But the rest of Oregon and Washington is very liberal. Same thing with Jefferson. Jefferson is very conservative, very supporting of the orange one, and the rest of California was not. So you're trying to convince a majority population who's maybe, 4 times your size to 35 times your size and has total opposite political values of you, and who you've recently insulted in a lot of tweets going back and forth, that, hey, do us a favor and let us go. Maybe they can do it, but that's the reality. You're going to have to convince people 4 to 30 times larger than you, who you have total different politics from, and who you said, I don't like your politics, to say, yeah, do me a bone, do me a favor, let me go. That's the political reality of this. Although it is getting a lot of attention routinely, and I'm not saying that the people there don't want it, but how aware are they of the hard politics of this? This is why here at Yes California, we did something a lot of progressives hated. We reached out to conservatives and brought them in on the dialogue here in California so that we could be taken seriously when we reached out to conservatives in America. And there was so much garbage that we got for that, and people saying that's the horrible wrong move. Well, here's the thing. Here's the Oregon, Washington people not doing that and not being aware of the reality. We were aware of the hard realities, and we took the hard, difficult steps to go in there. Most people, most activists won't. They won't think about this dispassionately. They won't think about the hard realities of what you're going to have to do, and the alliances and negotiations and talks you're going to have with people maybe you don't like in order to get things done. Most activists are like, no, screw that other side, screw them, I'll never speak to them. Well, that's how you totally fail. Any other comments? Okay, not to blah, 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 but sorry. Okay, moving on. What I'd like to do before we do this is Jason. could I call on you to explain who you invited to a Calexit Congress and who you've been in talks with?
Yeah. So this last year, I have been following someone on Twitter whose handle is Plastic Martyr. She's a model. She's a trans rights activist. She posts a lot of stuff that, some of it, if looked at just the one post, some folks might be inclined to think, oh, she's hardcore left. Or you look at another post and then it's like, whoa, she might be, on the right wing. But really, when you look at all of it, really, she's actually pretty fair. She seems fairly middle ground, right? Like what we say is reasonable, sensible, She posted something, I believe that was last week, about how Florida passed a bill. Now, that means that this atrocity, this thing that should never have been, got put up in front of Florida's legislators. They voted on it, and they agreed. They said, yeah, this is good. There's a bill that they passed just recently. And we talked about this in our committee meeting on Tuesday. It basically allows for state-sanctioned, state-administered sexual assault of children. Yeah, you heard that right. Let me say it again for those of you in the back or anyone who's shaking their head in disbelief or too busy throwing up. That was me the first time I found out about it. State-sanctioned, state-administered sexual assault of minors, children. This is a bill that has passed, was voted on, and agreed that it's a good thing in Florida. It allows for any teacher or school staff person of any sort. So not like the school nurse who actually has some sort of medical training, right? Just anyone who works at the school, all they have to do is, quote unquote, suspect that a child is trans or may be trans. And that gives them the legal authority under the state of Florida to take said child into a private room and personally examine their genitalia to confirm or deny their suspicion. Sorry, confirm or disprove.
I don't want to get bogged down on the gory details, but yeah.
Yeah, and now we also had the this can't be real, oh my goodness, and looked into it further, and here you go. Take it away, Marcus.
I'm just going to show a few screenshots. This is real. We just did this on Tuesday. Yes, this has actually happened. Now, it's not all of Florida. It is the House. It hasn't been confirmed by the Senate or the governor, but it passed the House, which is the largest body of Florida. And it's called the Women's Fairness in Women's Sports Act, and it does allow any school official, not well defined, to say, hey, I suspect you of being a transgender person. You are trying to get into a girls' sports league, and now I want to confirm that, and you have to pull down your pants and let me see your genitals. I'm kind of disgusted even talking about this. but it does appear to be true. It actually happened. Yes, this is America. This happens in America. It is what they say it is. It recently passed. It's called House Bill 1475, and it passed on a 77-40 vote. By the way, there's only one, I think, LGBTQ person in the entire Florida House. That person was against this, but the rest of everybody went for it. So that's a real thing. Anyways, Jason, what was the conversation you had with a well-known activist and trying to get them to come here and speak to us?
I let her know that she's invited and we would like her to come be a guest speaker, and help educate us on these issues. I mean, this isn't the only thing that falls under trans rights and equality type issues. There are unfortunately a lot of things to cover. So to have her come in and, educate us so that we can better formulate encompassing policy and, resolutions that'll help to protect our fellow Californians, our brothers and sisters. And her response was that she was excited, she's glad, and looks forward to it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get her here today, but hopefully next week or sometime soon. I'm hoping.
Sounds good. We want to have activists come to here. We're interested in activism. We work with Black Lives Matter. We work with Indigenous. We work with LGBTQ. We are Californians and we stand for our values. So if you are an activist and you're looking for a platform and anybody to listen to you, please come here to Yes California. You can go to yescalifornia.org or email me at marcus.ruiz.evans. We want to speak to you. We want you here if you're talking about any sort of California value. Jason, thanks for reaching out to Plastic Martyr, who is a well-known activist, and at least getting what we do here on the radar with that person.
Yeah, and I'd also like to point out that, she is, like I said, pretty fair. Some folks might see a candidate that falls with their own personal demographic and be absolutely unwilling to call that person out because they just want someone representative of their demographic to be in charge. She's not that person. She actually called out Caitlyn Jenner's hypocrisy right then and there when Caitlyn announced. Not because she doesn't value trans rights and equality, because she doesn't want someone hypocritical to be in the highest elected position in our state, our nation, our land. It's a nation state, so it is our nation. It also then blew up kind of worldwide, that one tweet. And I think it's kind of interesting how, we've got the first California independence candidate platform going up there with Mr. Louis Marinelli. We've got gubernatorial candidate Nicholas Wildstar, who I'm hoping might be California's first Black governor. We also have been seeing a rise of all sorts of, YouTubers and, just tons of different kind of average, I would say just average folk, right? Not superstars, movie stars, right? But there are some of those. But the ones that we're hearing about are those superstars, the movie stars, someone who did a hit and run and killed someone and then got away with it, right? Who also, the hypocrisy that was called out about her was, not that long ago, she gave a speech commending, trans girls for, hopefully you'll be able to play on the sports team that you wish and you identify with, and went on to support the orange one and is actually pretty much like has made it clear that really her stance is against letting trans girls play on girls sports teams, or trans boys to play on boys sports teams. So really the exact opposite of what she's now saying. So that tweet immediately went viral. I've got friends who are not in this country who like they're not really involved in American politics, right? One of them is an actor from Scotland, and I just noticed today he's actually following her now. Could it be because I retweeted her tweet and he saw it and said, "Oh wow, look at that. That's some hot stuff. Willing to call out hypocrisy no matter what."
We would love to have Plastic Barter come on and talk about Caitlyn Jenner in the recall election. We're having our recall debates. We are the only group to have hosted recall debates months ago before the recall was qualified in order to be informative to California voters. And it appears that we're the only group having recall debates again. It would be a privilege to have Plastic Martyr come and talk about the recall debate and how Jenner is or is not qualified for office. And we leave that space open for them whenever they are ready. Okay, thank you, Jason. Thank you. That was Jason Wright. Jason Wright is great at reaching out to people and making contacts. He's good at doing it around the world. Lots of people, lots around the world talk to him. A lot of times, Yes California, their first interaction with us is through Jason. So consummate professional, always making bridges. As Californians, that's what we do. We make bridges while Americans build walls. Governor Brown, 2017. Okay, now we're going to get to the meat and potatoes. Here is the big deal. Let's go right to it. So this is We Made ABC TV, and we're going to show that right now. Okay, why is that? All right. I had the volume all the way up.
I'm not hearing any audio.
Okay. So I have the volume all the way up on the speaker and all the way up on the video. This is all I can do. I apologize. So let's give it a few minutes. There's some title bars you can. Okay. Technology. 1 second here. Let me get this to work. Okay. I will post the video up. I understand the audio is not coming through. I apologize. I will post the actual links up. Anyways. Okay, so let me post the link up. Let's go to comments. Wildstar, you want to be my vice president by Mickey Myers. Lol. I was going to put him in the Federal Reserve, though, for Wildstar. Give him Pelosi's job. Oh, keep the comments coming. Thank you, guys. So as you saw there, that was Louis Marinelli. Let me put the link in to the official thing. 1 second. Sorry about that. So I'm going to post this in private chat. This is the original audio. So everyone can go directly to the source. There it is. It's posted in chat. It's called, 1 second. Sorry. Not good at. Okay, 1 second. We're getting there. Okay, if you go to ABC7 Bay Area for May 19th, 2021, that's May 19th, 2021, ABC7 Bay Area, May 19th, 2021, you can see Louis Marinelli there. This mouse is really not working today. Film live, ABC7 Bay Area, May 19th, 2021. Let me show you again, just so that you can see. I'll try to show you the original Facebook video. Whew, technology, always a good time. Okay, so I think he's about.
Maybe get sick, maybe not severely, but I think that's the day. Actually, I'm not sure it's fun, but it's worth talking about. Water cooler, if you will. How long the system doesn't treat them fairly, or yes,
here you go. Can you all hear that?
Recall election that is coming up.
Can people hear that?
Yeah.
Who is
Okay.
actually in a pretty good position now, and his popularity or approval rating has risen since we've kind of turned the corner on COVID. Nonetheless, he has a lot of people hoping to succeed in our position, and we'll talk to one of them right now.
I'll show the whole video and then we'll discuss.
Welcome back. As the latest sign of how circus-like the California gubernatorial recall is becoming, another candidate is throwing his hat into the ring to try to replace Governor Newsom. And it's none other than the man who grabbed headlines 4 years ago for California to withdraw or secede from the union and become its own country. Joining us today is the former leader of the Calexit movement, Louis Marinelli. Louis, how are you?
Great, thanks for having me on the program.
Yeah, so you just launched your campaign. Your platform is different, to say the least. What exactly are you running on?
A very simple plan. The plan is to become governor and declare California an independent country.
So a vote for you is a vote for secession from the U.S.?
Exactly. That's exactly what this campaign is about. It will be the first time in history that the people of California will actually have a chance to vote for secession, to vote for independence from the United States by voting for Marinelli for governor.
And what is your pitch for why that will put California in a better position?
Well, so many of California's problems. I mean, if you talk about problems from budget issues, financial issues, homelessness, a lot of them sprout from the fact that California is a donor state, and we're losing tens and hundreds of billions of dollars every year that get funneled from California to Washington, D.C., and then redistributed to other states. We're sponsoring and we're subsidizing the other states in this union, and we believe that it's time for a national divorce from those 49 other states, and for California to spread its wings and become an independent country.
All right, it's true that we get back 80 cents for every dollar paid on federal taxes, but economists agree, most of them, that a lot of our successes also come from sharing U.S. resources, right, including financial, military, and natural resources. You're really saying we don't need any of that?
Well, the thing is that secession from the United States is not secession from planet Earth. I mean, we're going to still work with our brothers in the American side of the border. They're our brothers and sisters and our cousins and our family members. We're not talking about a campaign of hate towards America. We're simply saying that California could stand up on its own, be its own independent country, and that we can work with the Americans on a host of issues and sign international trade deals that will allow us to continue to share those resources.
But but the message still is from California to the U.S. We can't coexist with you because we're sufficiently different. I mean, isn't that's causing all the hate that we've seen? Is that hey, we're different, so we're just going to leave you?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like that, but you know what? We like to kind of equate it to a situation where we have a bad situation in a marriage where a lot of people, after they get divorced, can have cordial relations with one another. And so we want to get out of the dysfunctional household that is the United States of America. We want to get out of each other's hair. We don't want to have conservatives in red America telling Californians how to live. And we don't think that conservatives in America want Californians telling them how to live. So we take the position that through independence, we can get out of each other's hair and live peacefully on North America.
Okay. That's not really a policy position, though. What is your position on things like pandemic recovery, right? Promoting businesses and creating jobs and fixing crime and homelessness?
My position personally is I believe that we need to get the government out of the way of businesses so that they can do their work in California. We want to attract businesses back to California. We're sick and tired of seeing people and businesses in California leaving our state. And we believe through independence that we can attract them back.
Okay, but speaking of leaving the state, though, a governor should live in his or her own state, right? And be deeply connected to and be aware of the issues here. You're not here. In fact, you're doing this interview with us from Russia, right? Where you've been living for a few years. I mean, why would Californians entrust you to run the state if you're not even here?
Sure. Yes, I do currently live in Moscow. I'm a kindergarten teacher. I also run here the California Culture Center and Embassy in Moscow, which we opened up to represent California values here. And so that question would be kind of like saying to an American ambassador that after serving as an ambassador in a foreign country that they wouldn't be eligible or able to come back to America and run for president. I've been living in Moscow. That's true. I live in Moscow now. My family's here in Moscow. I just recently welcomed a new child into the world, and I'm representing California values in Moscow. We have a permanent exhibit in a building here in Moscow where we exhibit California history and culture, and in doing so, I live here in Moscow, so I don't think that's a problem.
I'm not sure everybody sees the ambassador analogy, but okay. But what do you say to those who believe their work is mainly designed to either weaken the U.S. as a country and therefore benefit rival Russia or benefit Republicans? Because since California leans so heavily Democratic, if you take it out of the equation, Republicans would win presidential elections more easily.
Well, yeah, there's a lot in that question. If you let's look at the last one first of all, if we look at the history of American electoral college, the last time that California's electoral votes actually made a difference was in the 1800s. And you could look at the last presidential election. If California wasn't in the equation, did Joe Biden still win? He did, because he won by more than the number of California electoral votes there are. If you look at the Trump election, did Trump still win? Well, he won because he didn't win California, but he still would have won if he didn't win California. And Barack Obama also, if you look at all the elections up since about 1856, 1860, somewhere in that neighborhood, I forget the actual year, in the 1800s is the last time that California's electoral votes actually shifted the election from one candidate to the other.
All right, well, despite that, it's pretty clear from the U.S. Senate hearings on Russian interference in the 2016 elections that Twitter did say that Russian trolls were supporting the whole Calexit hashtag and platform. So are you telling us that, there's no Russian support here for you?
Absolutely not. There's not any Russian support here for this campaign. This campaign was created in California when I lived in California. Its president now is Marcus Ruiz Evans, who is a natural, native of California. And the people who support the campaign in California are Californians. I mean, this idea that Russia could get behind the campaign for California independence and that's the source of it all is nonsense, because there have been polls in California that showed more than a third of Californians outright support the idea of Calexit without any discussion on the issue, and another 15 to 20% are willing to look at the energy and the idea. So the problem is this is the issue. America has its problems. They weren't created by Russia. So this idea that Russia is going to be behind some kind of campaign to make America fall apart, that's not Russia. That's America. Americans are responsible for that. It's our problem and our fault as Americans that we can't get along with each other in North America. And so this campaign is not only about California independence, but also about keeping the peace in North America by allowing us to separate, like you said, national divorce. Let's have a national divorce from the other 49 other states and keep the peace in North America.
Well,
the U.S. Supreme Court has said that the states have no constitutional right to secede. Nonetheless, Louis Marinelli trying to get the conversation out there, joining us from Russia today, joining the recall election. Thank you.
I could just point out that the Supreme Court didn't say that. The Supreme Court said that a state can secede from the Union with the consent of the state. And as governor, I will reach out to the other states, I mean the majority of the other states, to get the consent of the other states, declare California an independent country, and move forward.
We'll get the constitutional lawyers to join us next time. Thank you. Take care. All right, coming up next, some Olympic gold medalists are about to join us. They were both born in San Jose and went to
Let me kill that.
which just won a national.
Okay, I know that was a little bit long, but thoughts, feelings. Let's go to some comments. We're gonna let's see here.
I thought it was kind of interesting how he, talked about, what he's been doing over there with the California Embassy / Cultural Center / quote, not an embassy. And her response to his explanation was, well, I'm not sure that everyone's going to get that ambassador reference. And much the same when he's clarifying for her, well, she actually stated something that was false. Not going to rip her a new one for it. I'm just saying she stated something false. She said that the Supreme Court ruled that states cannot secede. And Lewis pointed out very clearly, well, actually, the Supreme Court ruling pretty much said the opposite. They can secede if they have permission from the other state. And, her response to that was, well, we'll maybe get the constitutional lawyers in here next time. And folks, this is something we run into a lot. People saying, oh, the Supreme Court said you can't secede. That is false. That is a lie. The Supreme Court, what they said was states can if they have permission. So it's we battle this false narrative, and while we battle it, sometimes we get folks like this lady who aren't, trying to really go up against us. They're just saying what impression they have of things. And then we get to clarify for them, right? A lot of the times, those folks kind of aren't willing sometimes to really hear. I mean, you can show them the legal documents on the government's own website, and a lot of the times they still say things like, we'll have to agree to disagree. It's like, no, this is actual law. This isn't a time where you get to agree to disagree. This is called law. So, I commend her for covering him and for being pretty fair. I just can't help but notice that, there's this lingering false narrative. And this lady's a pretty well-respected journalist, a reporter, right? Like, usually those folks do their homework, dot their I's, cross their T's, because they don't want to look dumb on camera. Who does, right? So it just kind of says how deep this false narrative really runs.
Let's go into that. Let me show you guys a couple things, and this is for everybody to watch. And just to back up what Jason is showing. So here's the first thing. John Huntsman. John Huntsman was an ambassador to a country called China. And he was an ambassador for 3 years. And then guess what he did right after he finished being an ambassador? Ran for president. Guess what? No one said anything. His name is John Huntsman. So when she says, I don't know about that ambassador reference, that's interesting because there literally was an ambassador who literally was overseas. And the moment they were done, they immediately ran for president. And there was no guff at all. So interesting how she could completely miss this specific representative example that happened in recent history. This isn't, 50 years ago. This is the last couple of years. So just saying, this guy did it literally as Lewis is describing, not mentioned at all. How interesting. But this is one of my favorite ones. Lewis is abroad and he's overseas. Isn't that unfair? No. Do you know what California is? We're crawling with immigrants. Immigrants typically travel overseas to see family and friends. We have many Californians who are not immigrants and also own passports. So when you add all the immigrants together and you add all the Californians who are not bigots and love to travel, here's this map. Here's all of America. And then here's us. Now, yeah, New York, that New York, Jersey, DC metro area and Boston. So Boston, New York, DC. Yes, so the head of the federal government, the head of New York City, and Boston also have high levels of people traveling for these tiny states. And then here's California. Nothing like the rest of America. So yeah, it's kind of weird. Like, why are you traveling around the world? Why are you outside of the country at all? That applies to 45 states, and it doesn't apply to California at all. Again, completely missed. Now, when she was talking about the Russian trolls thing, this is the article she was referring to. It's the famous one by BBC, Russian Trolls Promoted California Independence. And I'm really glad that Lewis was able to get into the statistics, because it is ridiculous to say that a foreign government convinced 1/3 of 40 million people to think of an idea. That's insane. Especially given that California invented the internet, invented social media, invented Hollywood, invented marketing, invented promotional things. 1/3 of us got tricked by a foreign government when we're the place that invented all this stuff. It doesn't add up.
California has a history of independence that goes back to longer than California has been a state.
Yes. Again, not mentioned. She didn't mention that Reuters, Ipsos, and Stanford University showed 1/3 wanted to leave, 32%, and that 14 to 15% said they were open to the idea and not opposed. Now, GQ magazine quoted that. They said it was about 47.5% of Californians were open to independence. And yet somehow, although it was mentioned in GQ magazine, and although Reuters, Ipsos, and Stanford University showed that, she was not able to mention that, and instead referred to this BBC article, Russia Promoted California Independence. Well, let's look at that. Now, I want to show you something. This is key. Here's the title. Boy, that looks bad. Wow, Russian trolls promoted California independence. It seems like, social media accounts with ties to Russia pushed a huge Twitter trend in favor of independent California on election night. BBC has learned. Wow, that sounds horrible. Wow, they must have done the whole thing, and it's all a Russian plot, except when you read, and notice this, title, cover, read. Oh, down here. Of the 10,000 times this tweet was repeated, 2,000 of those accounts have disappeared, meaning they were robots. That means 8,000 tweets were regular folks or 4/5. This statistic is not at the title. It's buried below halfway through the article. I mean, you really have to read to find it, and it's one tiny blip. So here's a news reporter, took the title, didn't read the article, which was designed to bury the information down so that you wouldn't find it. And let's go to the last part. Texas versus White is an actual Supreme Court case and says you can, in fact, secede with consent of the states. Additionally, Attorney Generals Javier Becerra and Kathleen Kennelly and Kamala Harris have all recognized Texas versus White says you can secede with consent of the states. 3 separate California attorney generals. And yet none of this was mentioned at all in a live news report. I don't want to bog down on the issues, but I want to point out Jason's right. I mean, it's years later. Oh, it's illegal to secede. No, no, it's not. There's been a Supreme Court case for 150 years. Oh, Russia backed you all. No, they didn't. That article says not what you're saying. It says 4/5 were organic. Oh, and let's forget the 2 surveys that said that. Oh, nobody can be outside of the country and run for office. Actually, John Huntsman did it. And Californians have a ton of passports and aren't like the rest of America. Not mentioned at all. I find it interesting because that one quick comment. I find it interesting because the Sacramento Bee editorial board did the same thing to me. I'll pull that up here in a second. But the editorial board, the people who run the Sacramento Bee, did the exact same thing as ABC7 television. That's 2 well-known, big-time news agencies who got all their facts wrong. Sacramento Bee editorial board said that Lewis was still president. And he's still there. Hey, Sam. Jason, go ahead. Let me take a call from Lewis. Hey, I'm on the show, so you are live. I can go into a separate room if you need. Jason, go ahead and make a comment. Let me take this call real quick.
Okay, yeah. So I would like to point out, Marcus mentioned that between the 100% in favor of independence plus the portion of California that's at least open to it and not directly opposed to independence, is about 45.5%. Now, there's this nation that has been under the rule of another nation as a part of a union of nations, and that nation is named Scotland. Scotland, folks. Now, Scotland just had their election. The SNP, Scottish National Party, the party that is very much pro-independence, won by 47, well, not by, won with 47.7%. And it's been made clear that Brexit had about 37% support. And it got to get voted on, and it passed. Given that, Scotland definitely has a mandate with 10% more, right? And the number, the percentage value there is only 0.2%, 0.2% off from the kind of support that we have. And they've got far less people. They don't have 40 million people in Scotland. So if we were to do a comparative analysis, right, one could theoretically argue that we actually have more than enough for a mandate to at least pose the question. I would also like, while talking about this, to point out how the BBC, immediately after the Scottish National Party won their elections with an historic number of women being elected to minister positions, BBC started running an article claiming that it was all because of Iran. Russia, 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 Iran, Iran, Iran. Where does this sound familiar? Now, I guess someone somewhere who happens to be Iranian maybe retweeted something or gave a heart to something on Twitter that, you know, had something to do with Scotland and independence. Does it mean that Iran just made Scotland elect the SNP, re-elect the SNP? Does it mean that, you know, and the way the BBC put it is, you know, that Iran is the thing, the entity that's pushing Scottish independence. And now, if this is true, then we need to believe one of these two totally outrageous things. One, either Iran is nowhere near what we have all been led to believe, because Iran, if they really did get the SNP reelected, then that means Iran is responsible for the most women in Scottish history being elected to their government. Now, everything that I've been told about Iran's government and governance policies and women in government, right, says that that could not be so. Just that can't be. So then the other part is, okay, well, does that mean that we're supposed to believe that Iran is responsible for the fact that Scotland wants independence? So Iran has been secretly controlling Scotland for hundreds and hundreds of years, because Scottish independence actually goes back further even than California independence. I mean, come on, folks. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah,
So ridiculous.
he's right. Sam says you are a outer space alien. Sam says that you are a alien from outer space, brought here to bring us independence, and I agree. You're very good.
Yeah, and I always joke, because my favorite planet is Pluto, which is a planet. Fight me. Not really. It's kind of speech.
We're going to go to.
I always joke that I'm from Pluto and a Plutonian, and that's why I don't seem like you Earthlings. So I would just like to say, yeah, sure, totally. I'm from Pluto, and that means that I'm already independent from the Milky Way. Booyah!
Thank you, Jason. We're going to go to Louis Marinelli. Louis is here. Louis, we just covered the entire interview on ABC7 television. Everything you said. We talked about how the reporter presented some not accurate facts regarding the fact that, number one, it's illegal to secede. Texas versus White says that it is. Number two, the BBC article that acted like Russia spurred the whole Calexit thing. We just showed that, showing it was only 1/5, and that 80%, 4/5, we lost Louis. So I guess I don't need to do a summary. Okay. We got Louis back. We covered the fact that Texas versus White is a Supreme Court decision, says you can't secede. We covered that the Russia only promoted the Calexit tweet 1/5, and that 4/5 was organic, real-life Californians. And we covered the fact that Californians are not like Americans. We routinely travel around the world. We live in other countries. We have other languages. 45 states, 45, don't even come anywhere remotely close to the amount of internationalism that we exist on. And we covered that John Huntsman was a literal ambassador to a foreign country for years. And the moment he was done, he ran for president, and no one said anything. So you did a great job on the interview. I've been showing it to everybody. Everyone thought you did a good job. A lot of misinformation by the reporter. You cleared a lot of it up, and I was showing hard evidence to prove to back it up. What do you think about the interview? Thoughts, feelings, and questions for anybody? Please direct them to Louis. I'll feed them in.
Well, the interview was great, I think. I mean, we had an opportunity to speak to the people in the Bay Area and beyond, and to talk about the campaign. And I mean, like I've always said, and I talked about this in the past, that we need to be prepared for tough questions. And so I welcome the fact that the reporter there, the anchor on the program, put forth real questions so that we can show people that we have nothing to hide when she talks about, for example, Russia. if we had something to hide, we wouldn't be openly campaigning as a candidate living in Russia. And I appreciate the fact that she asked some questions that challenged us to, or me to, demonstrate that I know what I'm talking about when it comes to Texas versus White, for example, clarifying the record there that a state can secede with the consent of the states, whereas most people believe that that ruling declared that secession was unconstitutional. And on the other topics as well, she pushed me to get some information out there as to what we would do about businesses and some domestic issues as well. So I think it went well. I don't have any complaints about it. I certainly personally felt a little rusty because I hadn't been doing that in a while. And so all of a sudden when you start doing it again, you try to answer the questions and at the same time remember things that's on some occasions that you haven't spoken about in a while. So I like the interview. I think we got a good presentation of the facts, and we're getting ready for some more interviews in the near future.
Any questions for Lewis from anybody here on the panel? Sam, Adam Kokesh, Jason Wright, John Bowman, Mike. Any questions from anyone here about the interview with ABC Television or anything with Lewis campaign?
Yeah, Adam Kokesh here. Lewis, I'm really looking forward to interviewing you later this week for Adam versus the Man and doing what I can to promote your documentary as well. My question is sort of political strategery, as W would have called it. And it's, what kind of creative things are you doing to break out, given the unique recall circumstances? And I will say, for full disclaimer, I consider you one of my 3 friends in this race, along with Nick and potentially Libertarian Jeff Hewitt entering the race. And I hope you all, I would be ecstatic if either of the 3 of you won, obviously. I think you would respect those other candidates the same way. And I think you 3 are all worth materially supporting, but you in particular. But for me as an activist and as a member of this Congress, my question would be, what unique strategy do you have to break out in this exact climate as the Calexit candidate?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. I think that the answer to it is quite simple, to be honest. I think the fact that, political campaigns can break out as a result of attention. And I think that my candidacy, once it starts to gain some attraction, is just going to be a magnet for more attention. And that's because of the fact that, like I said, I'm in Russia, so there's going to be that intrigue there. And of course, we're not trying to take advantage of that fact, but we have to make peace with the fact that many people in the media are going to be intrigued by the fact that I live in Russia and think that I'm working on behalf of some foreign entity. That in and of itself is going to cause, I believe, some, media attention. And then also, if we talk about the campaign itself, the campaign itself is unique. Not only is the candidate unique and the candidate's location unique, but also the campaign itself is unique because we're talking about something that's never happened before. We've never had a chance in California to vote for a candidate that represented one thing, and that one thing being independence from the United States. And once we get that message out to people, and we know that there are people in California that support Calexit, we know that. That's not a question. When Marcus and I were doing this back in 2014 and 2015, traveling around the state, putting up our tent, it was just the 2 of us sometimes. But we interacted with people in different cities across the state of California, and there was never really debate about whether or not California could become an independent country. It was whether or not it should, right? And so we know that California can become an independent country. People were not sure whether or not it should, and that's what this campaign is going to change, because we're going to be able to talk about why it should, and we're going to be able to present people with an opportunity to actually vote for Calexit. And for years, we've been trying to do our best to get a ballot initiative on the ballot. requires hundreds of thousands of signatures, millions of dollars to qualify, and then they're subject to legal challenges anyway. This is a new strategy that we're employing, putting forward a person on a ballot that represents that idea. And that person can get on the ballot by paying a filing fee of $4,000, collecting nominating signatures, and then people have a chance to vote for an idea. And that's also what separates me from the rest of the candidates. And I'm really going to push this idea is that, you know, frankly speaking, a lot of people may not know me. And those who do know me may not like me. And I'm not asking people to vote for me. Like I have some personal ambition. I mean, you're going to listen to Kevin Faulconer. He's had a personal ambition to be governor for years. If you look at Gavin Newsom, he's going to be asking to vote for Gavin Newsom. I'm not asking people to vote for me. I'm asking for people to vote for an idea. And that's going to be unique because it's an idea that everyone supports. Even if they don't know me or they don't like me, they can still vote for the idea. And when I get on that ballot, under my name is going to be that ballot designation that says that I'm a advocate, a leader in the Calexit movement. And people will know that that vote represents a vote for Calexit.
Jack B.
Beautiful. I love the strategy. I look forward to hearing more creative tactics.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to our chat next week. I believe it's on Tuesday, and we'll be able to get more into details on a lot of those topics and more. And hopefully we'll be able to reach your audience and let them know that they're going to be among the first people who are aware of this rising candidacy and this rising opportunity for first time in, I think, of the nation's history, frankly. We'll have to look into that historical truth or not, but I don't know if there's ever been in any state a candidate running for governor on the topic of secession, including even the southern states, because I think that the southern states just seceded after the fact, after they had elected their governor. I'm not sure that there was a candidate that ran on the basis of, if you elect me, I will then join the Confederacy or something to that effect. I think that, I mean, we'll have to check. Marcus can check that information for us. He likes to do the research, but I don't think that the governors of the southern states before the Civil War got elected on that platform, specifically of seceding. And so I don't think there's ever been a candidate on the ballot for governor of a state that was on that particular point. And so that's historic, and I think that your viewers will be among the first to know about that. And when we win, they will be able to gloat about that. Hey, I knew about that before it was popular. I knew about that before it was it. And so nice. I think I'm looking forward to that chat with you and your supporters.
Any other questions for Lewis from Adam Kokesh?
No, that's great. Just encourage everybody.
One more thing I wanted to point out, just because I know that this, the logistics of this recall require the people to answer two questions. And the first question is whether or not Gavin Newsom should be recalled. Well, if you know the name of our organization, you might know what we want people to vote. We want people to vote yes on recall. Because if they vote yes on recall, that's a yes for independence, because then they can vote for Marinelli for governor. So this is just going to be like an independence referendum on both levels. Do you want Gavin Newsom to be recalled? Translate that. Do you want California to be an independent country? Vote yes on the recall. And then vote for the candidate who promises to make that happen. So this upcoming recall election is the Calexit referendum. And voting yes is a vote for independence.
I'd like to ask candidate Marinelli a question.
Yeah, give me one. Go ahead, Jason. I will be back, everybody, in 1 minute. I'm bathroom break. Please direct questions to Lewis. Jason, right.
So the California Cultural Embassy in Moscow, how is it doing lately? I remember seeing some stuff, some pictures when it first got opened. I'd seen a couple of things. There were a couple of events you had held in the past there. Knowing that it's not just North America that's, being ravaged by COVID, right? And being locked down hardcore. And, so my wonder is, how is our embassy looking?
How is the what? It's very quiet. I can't really hear so well. But how is it what?
How is our embassy looking? Our cultural center, is it still getting visitors? If so, could you speak to maybe some of the interest that you're seeing over there?
So we haven't had any public activities due to the pandemic, and but that's going to soon be changing because on June 14th we have an event scheduled at the California Embassy where we are going to be distributing to those who apply for it a symbolic visa to California, and that is going to correlate with the date that the American Embassy is ceasing to issue visas of any kind to Russians, except for diplomatic visas. And so on the day or in the week that the American Embassy in Moscow ceases to process and issue visas of any type to Russian nationals, the California Embassy in Moscow will be issuing symbolic visas for those who come and apply and go through a process that we're going to set in place. So that's going to be our first kind of public event that we've had in over a year now because of the pandemic. But beyond that, though, I mean, the embassy still has its the content from its previous exhibit, which we put on. Gee, that was 2019, I guess. 2019, the summer of 2019, I guess. And we have up there still an exhibit of California's governors, including Jerry Brown, including Mr. Newsom. We have a big portrait of him up on the wall too, because he is actually the current governor of California. So we have, along with these portraits of California governors, we have information about the things that they believe and the things that they ran on and the values that they represented as governor. And we also have another wall exhibit of portraits of important figures from California's history. People like Harvey Milk is up on the wall with the things that he represented. And we even showed the Mill movie about him at this exhibit on California culture back then. So those things are still basically in their places because they basically just got left there after the pandemic started. But we're going to be opening up again pretty soon here, as soon as some restrictions are lifted up in the city of Moscow. And like I said, we're looking forward to putting on that symbolic visa issuance event to those who want to go to California, because we know that a lot of Russians, when they actually apply for American visas, they actually want to go to California. And so we're going to be issuing them some symbolic visas. Of course, they're not going to be able to travel there, but we are going to make a point that, America is ending its issuance of visas to Russians. They can't come to America anymore, but California, if it was an independent country, wouldn't be doing that. And California would be allowing Russians to continue to travel to California, because we believe that the interaction between people of different nations is so important and vital to the preservation of peace and the development of cooperation between nations. And that's why we would keep our borders that are open, and we would continue to issue visas to those who want to engage in that multicultural exchange.
Awesome. Thank you very much for all that. That's really good to hear. I'm seriously happy because I love the embassies. Trying to get one going over in Finland, get one for Armenia. We're working with Baja to get one started up there, hopefully this summer as well. I also, you probably know, the Progressive Solution book that a lot of us helped out on. I have a physical copy, paperback copy of it. And my thinking is I would like to have it go around to all of us who had something to do with it, and then send it over to our embassy to be another piece of interactive display.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it would be great if we could open up more embassies in those places that you were mentioning of. In fact, that reminds me that we have coming up, I'm not sure of the exact date yet, but we will be attending the next Dialogue of Nations conference. And we will be able to represent California Independence Campaign on the international stage again, as we did in Moscow in 2000 and I guess it was 2016 when we last did that. We will be attending the next Dialogue of Nations conference, which will be attended by independence and separatist movements from around the world. And at that meeting, I'm sure that I'll be able to make great progress in helping you and the rest of our team establish relationship with these movements and eventually, potentially, hopefully, establish some kind of an office at these locations as well. So we're going to be able to make great progress in that regard. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, I'm just going to put these earphones on because it's, for some reason, it's very quiet and I can barely hear anything, is we have potentially very significant and major news issue that we are working at achieving through this California embassy, through the relationships that we've been able to build with some members of the Russian society. And so I can't say anything now, but potentially we have something of very significance coming forward out of the California embassy in Moscow. So keep your eyes open. And I think that that sets a good precedent for opening these other locations, because if we can do that in Moscow, we can do it in other places as well. And I think that's a good thing.
And one last quick follow-up question. Is there somewhere, and this is mainly for our viewers, is there somewhere where folks can go online to virtually visit our embassy?
So sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so I didn't know if the mic button was on or off, because it looked like it was off because it's kind of highlighted. Yeah, we used to have an embassy website. When the embassy kind of went offline for a short period of time, we discontinued the website. But we're looking at, of course, getting the website back up and running. And so in the future, I think we may have some opportunity to have some kind of virtual ability to check out what's going on at the embassy.
Is it just me that the sound cut out for?
Hold on one second.
Okay.
Yes, everyone can hear both of you guys. Everyone can hear you, Jason, and everyone can hear you, Lewis. So everything, Lewis, you said, and everything, Jason, you said, everyone heard.
Okay. Hold on one second. I'm just trying to get these headsets on because it seems like it's very quiet.
Technology. Lewis is here. Other questions for Lewis? Jason, any more questions? John Bowman, Sam Cheney, Adam Kokesh, Mike, Sam Cheney. What questions?
All right, questions. Where does the Louis Marinelli campaign stand on censorship? Because I'm getting killed over here by censorship.
Lewis, the question is,
And considering big tech's coming out of California, Silicon Valley, the home of censorship here. So where do you stand on that? Should everybody be censored and we just get one message from the all-seeing eye in the sky?
So I typed out the question.
Okay,
Lewis,
yeah. So Sam, to be honest, I didn't hear the question, but I did hear censorship, and so I'll give you the answer. I don't support censorship, whatever it is. So whoever's doing the censoring, I don't support it. And I hope that answers the question, because I didn't hear the rest of it, but I know it had to do with, do you support censorship? No, I don't support censorship, especially when it comes from the government.
It's not coming from the government. It's coming from private corporations that are centered in California.
Okay, so I believe that, I've heard more of your question now. I believe that as a society and in our laws, we should recognize that in the 21st century, the public square is the internet and platforms that we use on the internet to communicate with one another. Just like in the 1800s and the 1900s, the public square was a physical location outside, or literally in the public. where that was the arena for public debate in which the First Amendment was protected, free speech was protected. I think that we need to recognize that we've now shifted that to some extent, where the public square should include the internet, and platforms of social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram should also carry the same First Amendment protections as the public square outside does. And so from that point of view, if you're talking about private corporations or the government, I think that what people say on Facebook ought to be protected by the First Amendment. And what people say on Instagram and Twitter should be protected by the First Amendment. And no private entity or the government should have the ability to restrict what is being, what people are saying, unless it, of course, falls under the same category of things that can be restricted in the traditional sense of a public square. For example, we're not, First Amendment doesn't protect the ability to scream that there's a fire in a crowded theater because it presents a clear and present danger to lives. And so from that context, if you're going to be publishing things on the internet that is a threat to public safety, like an immediate direct threat to public safety, then of course, perhaps those kind of comments could be restricted, as they would be in the public square in the traditional sense. But other than that, though, I think that the bar needs to be set very high for deleting or restricting or censoring people's comments on the internet.
Other questions for Lewis?
Yeah, my next question is, where do you stand on?
Guys, I don't know why it's so quiet. I can barely hear anything. Is it my phone?
Must be your phone.
It might be.
Marcus, if you can go to another topic for a minute, I'll figure out my sound thing, and then I will be able to answer questions. I can barely hear anything.
We'll come back to Lewis and questions for Lewis. So Sam, John, Mike, Adam, Jason, if you have other questions, please type them in the chat, and I'll just post them right up, and then Lewis can definitely see them. He doesn't have the audio hear him, and we'll get him to it. So if you want, post some questions. I'll post the questions. But since I have a second, I do want to show you guys something. So we were talking about a little bit unfair coverage in the news. And Jason was talking about, so Scottish independents qualified, and immediately the news is saying, Iran meddled in the Scottish elections. Don't look at this. Well, those were British newspapers. And the Scottish newspapers are saying this is garbage. So here's England, doesn't want Scotland to go. And they ran all sorts of articles saying, oh my God, Iran is meddling in the Scottish election. That's why it passed. And then here's the Scottish version. That's all garbage. You guys blew a tiny thing way out of proportion. Well, that's not the only one, because we had the same thing done to us. We were able to get Calexit to be the 7th popular word on the social media last year. And in return, the Sacramento Bee editorial board said that Iran is behind everything and it's all a big trick. It talked about social media operatives from Russia push the Calexit narrative from that BBC article that we talked about. So here's SacB referring to Russia push the narrative, showing that BBC article, which we just showed you, said that 80% was real-life Californians. Again, not mentioned by the ABC News reporter or by the Sacramento Bee editorial board. I think it's an important question to ask. Why can't the people who run Sacramento Bee, and why can't one of the top reporters for ABC television, 2 separate media agencies, recognize that this article showed that 4/5, 80% of Californians backed Calexit? And why do they instead just read the headline when we know a lot better now? Interesting that 2 separate media organizations would do that. Additionally, in this media organization, in this article, they mentioned Lewis is president, Lewis is president, Lewis was president in 2017. There's my photo, but they won't, and there's Bart Gilbert, by the way, but they won't mention that I'm president. So Lewis is president because of information from 3 years ago. I'm not president, although I was in the Iran video and my photos here. and focus on Russia, 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 and Lewis in Russia. And here we go again with Scotland has a successful vote. Don't look at them. Look at Iran, 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 Iran. So you can see how there's a government doesn't want you to go. And one of the first things they do is say, oh, a foreign power is behind the whole thing. And if you support this, you mean the destruction of our country. So, Louis Marinelli.
Yeah, I have my sound back now, so I can hear things quite clearly now.
Questions for Louis?
Yes, if there are any other questions that I missed.
Ahmed K says, my question for Louis Marinelli, could you tell us more of advantages of an independence for California?
Yeah, sure. So could you tell us more of the advantages for independence? Of course. Well, one of the main advantages that we've talked about for years is the fact that California pays more federal taxes than it receives in the form of federal funding and grants and other forms of support from Washington. So we're on the losing end of that deal. And as a result of that, we in California have to pay higher taxes and more fees to make up the difference because we're losing money. That money gets lost and it gets redistributed to other states that we're now effectively subsidizing at our cost, at our detriment, to our detriment. And so when we pay for fees, when we pay higher taxes in California, part of the reason is because we paid federal taxes that we then didn't get back in the form of federal funding. And then Sacramento has to make up the difference. So by keeping California's taxes in California, we can lower our taxes, pay down our debt, and fully fund public services that the California population needs, whether it be healthcare, education, infrastructure. All of those things can be paid for by the taxes that we currently pay without paying any more taxes and even lowering taxes, because you wouldn't be paying two sets of taxes, one to Washington, one to Sacramento. All those taxes that you pay would be going to one source. And so that streamlines it and it allows us to reduce the tax burden in general. Another advantage is the fact that we could get California out of America's foreign military adventures. Californians pay 13% of the federal budget. That means that as a result, Californians are paying 13% of the American military budget, which is over $700 billion a year now. So imagine if California wasn't paying 13% of a $700 billion military budget. And instead, we were paying what would be equivalent to a military budget of Canada or Mexico or another country in North America, except the American Empire. With that money that we save there, tens of billions of dollars every year can be then redistributed to other projects in California. That's where we can do a lot of, make a lot of progress towards California's reconstruction of our infrastructure, fully funding our education system so that people can go to institutes of higher education and not have to pay fees, and fully fund our healthcare system so that everyone has at least basic healthcare services covered. So there are so many benefits, and it all really boils down to the fact that California is a donor state, and we're losing federal funding, or we're losing federal taxes to the other states that we subsidize in this union, many of which, by the way, are states that have a opposite point of view on how the world works. When we're talking about, we're not necessarily subsidizing Washington State or Oregon State or New York or Massachusetts. We're subsidizing Alabama and Tennessee and Arkansas, states that have a mentality that's completely opposite of California's.
Is that talking point even true? Prove it.
Which one?
That we're a donor state. I want to see the books. I've never seen any hard numbers on that. I just hear a talking point all day.
Sure. Well,
so if you go to the irs.gov, you click on statistics. You can search for individual states and years, and you can see. I've actually recently been looking at it for research for a project.
Post a link.
Yeah. Hey, Sam. Here's the deal. I'm not the first person to bring up this point. I believe the first person in modern California history to bring this up was actually Arnold Schwarzenegger. And you know what they did after he started mentioning how much money specifically California was losing in this deal? The statistics had been for years and decades organized in such a way where you could see the difference your particular state did. Your particular state paid X dollars and received X or Y dollars back. That was organized in such a way for years and maybe decades. And then Arnold Schwarzenegger comes to be governor of California, starts talking about the donor state situation. And ever since then, they rearranged the way that the statistics are organized so that it's much more difficult to see how much your state pays versus how much your state gets back. That's not a coincidence.
Let me tell you one thing I know for a fact.
To prevent
California does not pay.
That it's a joke.
Let me tell you one thing I know for a fact working in the industry. California does not pay the federal unemployment insurance tax back to the federal government. So businesses in California are on the hook to pay it twice, once to the state, once to the feds. Okay. And I know that as a fact.
Sure, but we're not talking about federal unemployment insurance here. We're talking about
I'm telling you one item specifically that I know for a fact because I work in the industry and I do it.
Yes, but the federal unemployment insurance is outside of this equation that we're talking about, where people say we get 80 cents on the dollar. That's outside of that equation. What we're talking about is general taxes. General income taxes and commercial taxes that are paid to Washington. There's
many different taxes. You got to be specific and explain this to an accountant over here because I really don't understand. You're being very generalized.
I know you're an accountant, but I'm talking about of the taxes that California actually pays. You're talking about taxes that California doesn't pay.
Yeah.
We're talking about the taxes that are paid. Of those taxes that are paid, we don't get back 100% of them to California. So what you're talking about here is a problem on top of that problem, because we're not paying those taxes like you just explained. But I'm talking about the taxes that are paid by Californians. Of those taxes that go to Washington, we don't get back our fair share of those. So your problem is another one to look into as a problem that makes this situation even worse. Not an example of how California is not a donor state, but how California is a donor state, and on top of that, there's this additional problem. What would the new currency be? Someone's asking, what would the new currency be? Well, I think that, California, like many countries, could adopt the dollar as its currency. It doesn't have to. I'm not saying that it has to, but the United States of America is not the only country that uses the dollar as its currency. And I also think that we should be open to cryptocurrency in independent California. I think that that's an interesting field to look into, the possibility of cryptocurrencies. And I know that around the world, even though the dollar is the reserve currency, that many countries are moving away from that. So perhaps it would be a step in the wrong direction to adopt the U.S. dollar. And maybe if we look in another direction, we'll have to look into that question in more detail to decide what the currency would be. But at least in the beginning, I would say that it would be important for California to adopt the dollar just to maintain kind of a situation where it's familiar with the people of California who were once American citizens and are not anymore, would then continue to use the dollar and understand the financial system under which they live.
All that data that Marcus just showed is old. Do we have any current data?
It's only a few years old, so let's
7 years old, 8 years old.
So Sam, I can say I haven't looked up the last couple of years myself personally, but I know that there is what maybe Sean was talking about here was that there's what's called the IRS SOI. If you look up that PDF, there's the IRS SOI, and it's a yearly publication, and they have that information in there. There's also information that's available in the census report as well. So what I can do, Sam, after we get off this call, is I can have Marcus or myself, we can send you the links from our bibliography, because we put this information together, as you said, a couple of years ago in our bibliography for the Calexit book. And that link that we can provide you will be to the page where each year's statistics are published. So you'll be able to get the most recent numbers if they're available, if they're published.
Well, check it out. What I see is California got a bunch of federal bailout money from the COVID bailouts, and then Newsom's turned around and spending that money to try to prop up his political career in all kind of different schemes, giving away in all these welfare schemes.
I understand, and I'm with you there. But here's the thing, though. Back in 2008, when there was the economic crisis, California also got more money than it paid during the economic crisis. So it's not a situation where, regardless of the situation of the day, California always pays more money. But in general, when we're not in the middle of an emergency, such as an economic crisis or a pandemic, where more than 500,000 Americans have died, in years where we don't have those types of national emergencies, California is a donor state. Maybe this year it's not because it received some bailout money. Maybe in 2008 and 2009 it wasn't because of the economic crisis and the money that was paid to states during that time period. But in the off years, when we don't have an emergency, California is paying much more to the federal government than it gets back. More, I would say, than we get back in these emergency years. It doesn't even out.
If I could just one little thing. So yes, you're right. The data is a little bit old, but here's the thing. It goes from the 1980s to 2014.
We're in a different era. You saw the money printing; it goes straight up. We're in a different era now. You can't apply. You can't even apply that. We're in a whole different era now.
Okay, Sam, I'd like to answer the question. Give me 1 minute to go through the information, uninterrupted, if you're willing. And I can explain what you're talking about. So we have been a donor state from the 1980s through now. You have 30 years of data. We've lost over $500 billion we've never gotten back. Now, in 2012 to 2014, the federal government did something known as qualitative easing, where it literally printed money. That's inflated dollars. So a lot of times, and this gets to what Lewis talked about, the Schwarzenegger said that we were a donor state, and then Dianne Feinstein, a sitting senator, and Barbara Boxer said, "You're a liar." And they pointed at data from just 2014. And said, well, look at 2014. We had more money coming into California than California paid. So the whole concept about being a donor state is garbage. Well, no, that's not true. John Myers, an LA Times reporter, helped also with the trick. What they were doing was ignoring a 30-year time frame and picking 1 year and saying, this 1 year, the data shows X. So let's assume that applies to a 30-year time frame. That's not fair statistics. We're also seeing the same thing now with the stimulus money. So if you look at 2020 going into 2019, it will appear as though California is not a donor state because there's more money coming in. But it's the same concept. We sent value dollars into the federal government. They literally printed inflated dollars that are a fraction of the value that we sent to them and sent that to us. And so what they're doing is going, I'm sending you dollars that are a fraction of the value that you're sending me, but there's a larger number of them. I will not explain this to the public. I won't walk it through the news, and I'll have a senator act like, see, there's no issue. So if you got John Myers, a well-known tax reporter for the LA Times, and 2 sitting California senators lying and misleading the public while not explaining how inflated dollars are not the same as uninflated or pre-inflated dollars, then yes, it would appear that way. But we've been a donor state for 30 years. We are a donor state every single year, except when the federal government goes crazy and starts printing cash, which you yourself, Sam, have said they should not be doing. But that only proves the point of being independence. We're a donor state, and the only time things get good is when they destroy the currency. That's your answer.
And Marcus, I would just add an analogy, because I know that Sam, I think, is critical of the climate change debate. You know, we don't judge climate based on a particular weather event. And so right now you could say that, you know, the fact that California received more money this year is a weather event. Doesn't mean that the climate of California has changed because of a particular year's weather. And in 2008, we also had a different weather pattern that year because of the economic crisis. But the climate over 30 years, and that's how climatologists judge what a climate is. They look at a 30-year period of data, not just 1 year. So what the people like Feinstein want to do is they want to look at 1 year and say, look at the weather today. It's sunny and beautiful. So that means that the climate must be sunny and beautiful. But if you look at the climate, a financial climate of taxes being paid to Washington and funding being returned from Washington over a 30-year period since the 1980s, the climate is pretty gloomy for California.
On top of, to back up Lewis, we don't set our own ag terms, so we do not make the maximum profit we could from ag. That reduces our tax base. We are not allowed to sell international products to every country we want because we have to wait 5 to 10 years for federal approval. That is ruinous for businesses. Our technology products such as smartphones and laptops have reduced suppressed sales because we're associated with America, because most of the world thinks that America will spy on them. Additionally, our trade policies, we've also lost, I think, $70 billion according to Abraham Lowenthal. So besides being a donor state, Sam, we don't even get to make the kind of money that we're supposed to because someone's getting in our way. How's that good? And what I like about it,
if I just add to that, Marcus, as we know, in the Western states, the federal government owns the majority or large proportions of the territory in the states. Not so much on the eastern side of the Mississippi, but on the western side. So California, I think the number is around 47% of the state is owned by the federal government. They control which resources can be extracted. And California is now being paid the royalties from those resources that are being extracted, whether it be oil or other resources for minerals and things of that nature that are being extracted from California territory that's owned by the federal government. We're not receiving our royalties for those. Now, first of all, a lot of Californians wouldn't want those resources to be extracted because a lot of them care about the environment. But that's a different topic. The point is that those resources are being extracted. And to make it worse, we're not even getting paid for that, what we should be getting paid for. So if California was an independent country, aside from taxes, aside from funding, just our resources would be under our control. And if we decided to use them or extract them, we would be paid royalties into our budget in exchange for them.
Well, they've squandered forest management in the state. That's one natural resource that has gone up in flames. And you mentioned the weather. Everybody should look up geoengineering. They're chemtrailing all the time.
Well, I tell you what, you know what? Like we said, I'm living in Moscow, so when I look up at the sky, I don't see the chemtrails up here in Moscow. But
well, you sure do here in the Central Valley of California.
I'll tell you about the forests. So the forests are also under the control of the federal government, which poorly maintains them, allows them to grow more dense than they should. And as a result, when there's a forest fire, that forest fire is worse than it should be. If the forests were properly maintained, the forest fires would be fewer and less severe. But they're being managed by the federal government, poorly managed by the federal government, the result of which are massive and severe forest fires. That's not the state of California at fault. But that is
it gets all the way down to the county government, man. I worked with local groups, concerned citizens for the Central Valley here, and we went to the county board of supervisors, and they won't listen. It goes all the way down to your local government here, county, state, federal. They won't listen.
Sure, but the point of the matter is that the land is ultimately, due to the supremacy clause, controlled by the federal government. And if the people, even if the people of California wanted to do something about it, you know, if the federal government was opposed to that, it'd be the decision of the federal government. That those forests are managed by the Federal Park Service and the other agencies of the federal government, and they allow them to grow too dense. They don't manage them properly so that forest fires are less severe and less frequent. And that's just a fact. I mean, that's not to say necessarily that California is an independent country and the Cal Parks would do this amazing job and there would never be forest fires or anything like that. We're not talking about that. We're simply talking about the fact that the current status quo is that the forests are controlled largely by the federal government, and therefore, when there are forest fires, they're responsible for them.
I don't disagree, but what I'm saying is we can't even get pushback from the local county government here, okay? That's what I'm saying. Forget the state. We can't even get, for the district that the county supposedly is representing, we can't even get representation on, and that's your most basic level, the county here.
Well, yeah, and that's my answer to that problem is simple. It goes back to the core of why California is a state to begin with. And that's simply that there's too many Americans in California. And by that, I mean not citizens, but people with an American mentality. They don't care about California first. They're Americans, and they're in positions of power. If you look at the politicians in Sacramento, how many of them would go out there and say, I'm a Californian first? Most of them, because they have ambitions for higher office, would say that they're an American first. So the people in power in California, in Sacramento, in these county offices, they're Americans first of all. And they care about America first of all. If we were able to elect people to offices in California, for example, governor, who was Californian first, I'm sure that the policies of that government, including at the county level and the city level, full of people who believed in the California first mentality, they'd have a different approach to those type of problems. But Gavin Newsom, he rejected Calexit. He said he doesn't want to abandon his brothers and sisters in America. His mentality is that of an American, American first, because he has ambitions for higher office. So that problem is the fact that there's too many Americans in California, and we need to elect people to office who believe that they're first and foremost a California national who cares about California.
Yeah, the other truth of it, Sam, is that I've talked to many Republicans. Every one of them has said this. How many of you been to Sacramento? Everybody raises their hand. How many of you gone a couple times? Everybody raises their hand. How many of you been to DC? One hand out of 30. It's easier to hold government to account when they're closer. And working in Sacramento and working in the government for 20 years, one of the reasons California politicians or county politicians are able to get away with mischief is they can go, there's so many myriad of laws, I can't be blamed, I can't do this because it's so-and-so, and they can't.
They defer the responsibility off to outer space. I mean,
yes. So what if nobody got to do that in California ever again? And anytime there was a problem, you went to Sacramento and they go, well, I can't. Yeah, you can. And you have no one else to blame. And it's all you, and you have to be held accountable. And there's a 50% reduction in bureaucracy. As you pointed out, people have to pay federal and state taxes and bureaucracy. So 50% less bureaucracy, no one to blame. And we're not going to have an explosion in accountability of elected officials like we dared to dream of before.
let me add to your point there, Marcus. I went to a few years back, I went to the local Air Resources Board here in Fresno complaining about the chemtrails, the geoengineering. And they basically admitted it's happening, but they said we don't have jurisdiction. That jurisdiction goes to the federal government. So I'm asking my local Air Resources Board, hey, what are you guys going to do about the particulates that are being sprayed over my head here? You care about air pollution. And they say it's out of our jurisdiction. We defer to the federal government.
There you go. Imagine if they couldn't do that. And they had to answer.
Well, they pass the buck is what they do here.
And we can pull the buck away from them. So they never going to use that again. That's something Republicans and conservatives in California have never had. Louis, there's a question for you from someone. How do we fix homelessness?
Homelessness is a tragedy of one-party rule in California by the Democratic Party in Sacramento. I mean, just like any of the other problems in California are a problem of the Democratic dominance in Sacramento because they've been in control of the government for decades. So any problems that exist in California, right off the bat, we have to acknowledge that it's a result of the Democratic leadership. And so if we can start from that premise, that the problem is the Democratic leadership and the policies that they promote, then we at least know where we can start. And that means start by doing something different than what we've been doing for the last several decades, under which this tragedy has been allowed to expand. I mean, we have to approach this problem from several different angles. And one of the most important ones, I think, is to get the government out of the way of developers so that they can develop more housing. Cheaper and easier. It needs to be cheaper. It needs to be easier to build housing in California. And that would be important, especially when it comes to affordable housing. That would be important for getting those who want to get off the streets into housing. Because one thing that a lot of people I don't think realize is that a lot of people live on the streets voluntarily. So I don't think that you're going to eradicate to 0% homelessness, because some people are content with that. And I don't think that it's a situation where you're going to be able to find some solution for everybody on the street. People want to be there. Another approach that I support is creating at the local level, creating some kind of a system where homeless and low-income families or adults could join a program of community beautification, where they would be employed by the city or county government, or maybe even the state. We can look into the options. And they would work on a daily basis to work on projects that are about community beautification, whether it be raking the leaves or shoveling the snow or picking up litter, repainting over, highways and walls that have been vandalized and things of that nature. And in exchange for that, we can allow them to have an income and a place, a shelter over their heads. And so I think that might be an avenue that we can pursue to allow people to have somewhere, some source of income and a shelter over their heads, in order to give them perhaps some opportunity to, some time and some breathing space to get back up on their feet. So I think it'd be important, because I know that when I walk down the street in San Diego, there's a lot of work that can be done to make San Diego more beautiful in terms of its community, in terms of its landscaping and litter and vandalism, and things of that nature. And what if there was, imagine if there was, I know we don't have snow in a lot of places in California, but there are some places in California that do have snow. Imagine if there were people that came around and shoveled the sidewalks and you didn't have to do it yourself. Imagine if there were people that came around and they were raking the leaves. And in exchange for that, they would be given housing and they would be given food and a place to live. So I would support those kind of programs that employ those who want to be employed, who are living on the streets, as a method to give them shelter and a leg to stand on while they rebuild their lives.
Okay. Any other questions for Lewis?
I'd say a major roadblock in the housing issue is zoning. Okay, and that's down to your local. That's down to your local government, your city and county. The zoning ordinances that they put in place, and they're following a UN agenda here, and that's the elephant in the room we need to address. Are we going to follow what the UN says? Or are we going to follow what the federal government says? Or are we going to follow what California says about our zoning here? Because you can go look about Agenda 21, and that's the zoning requirements that they're following here.
Yeah, well, of course, I understand what you're talking about. The fact that zoning is going to be a hurdle in some regard for the construction of housing and the types of housing that gets built there and the amount of people that can live in a certain zone and so on and so forth. So I understand that idea. We're just going to have to do our best to get government out of the way of developers so they can develop housing for the people of California. And one of the things that we also need to do is to reduce the impact or the power of the environmental community, the environmental activists who want to, cause these projects to take so long to be finished, for housing to be completed, because they want to have different reports about the environmental impact and so on and so forth. So a lot of that stuff, I mean, these people have, I think, good intentions, because of course it's always a good intention if you care about our environment and the air and the water and so on and so forth. It's a noble cause, but we need to get out of our way sometimes, out of our own way. And we have so many people, so many Californians living on the streets. And if we could do something to get them some shelter, I think that would outweigh a particular environmental impact report or another. So, like I said, let's get out of our own way and build some housing and get people off the streets if that's what they want.
It feels like an emergency crisis here, the homelessness in California. So, I mean, we got to cut some red tape regulation sometime and put humans before the bureaucracy of environmentalism here. Everybody wants clean water and air, but we don't even address the elephants in the room. And I'm so sick of it and fed up. They're putting fluoride in the water. Okay, so how can we have clean drinking water? I'm sick of the lies, man. We're living a freaking lie, and I'm fed up, and that's why I'm censored, because I'm here to tell the truth and address the elephants in the room, man.
If I may, the two things making the climate so difficult to make cheap and quick homes is CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. That is a state law, not county, supersedes all of it. That can be changed at the state level exclusively. The other part was Scott Wiener almost passed a law forcing infill homes, and that did not pass in Sacramento. If it did, they would have changed. So the changes can happen in Sacramento alone, just to be clear. Lewis, you have another question from the audience. Asian community attacks. What would you do?
What would I do about reducing the attacks on Asian Californians?
Yes, I believe that's the question.
Yeah. So we have to, I guess, look at the source of those attacks, and I think undoubtedly we could point towards the previous presidential administration, at least from a short-term point of view. I think a lot of rhetoric from the previous administration, previous president, laid on the shoulders of Asian Americans and Asian Californians the blame for the pandemic. And I think that if we can take that into consideration, we can know where we're going to start, because we don't want to have Asian Californians being attacked or discriminated against because of some misconception that Asian community is somehow responsible for the pandemic, because there's some people who believe that the pandemic resulted or came about as a result of actions of China. And so this is kind of similar to if we go back and look at, for example, Japanese internment camps in California. Again, this is a situation where, the government was discriminating against and treating Japanese residents of California poorly just because of their the way they look and their heritage and their ethnic background. And so we have developed and we have progressed so much from that, and it's kind of disappointment to see that there's still an element of that type of society in California where we're going to be discriminating against people based on their ethnicity. And so I think that what we have to do is address the issue head on and to do what we can to improve relations, at least a public relations campaign to, get the truth out there that it's not the fault of a particular ethnicity. This pandemic that we're in is not the fault of a particular ethnicity. And, I'm sure that there's many examples of leaders in the Asian community and members of the Asian community who have done a positive service for this pandemic. Doctors, nurses, teachers who have sacrificed themselves and worked hard throughout this pandemic for the betterment of our community. And perhaps we could go on some campaign to highlight these Californians of Asian ethnicity, to show that there are Asian Californians who have been working throughout this pandemic and have been saving lives, have been teaching your children, and they're not to blame for the pandemic.
Lewis, I'm glad that you brought up those Japanese internment camps. That's a little known fact, and it has happened in America. American citizens at that time under progressive hero FDR were put in internment camps during World War II, and we can never allow that to happen again.
Well, of course, I totally agree. Totally agree. That's why I brought it up, because we in this country do have a history of discrimination basically against everybody except for the white man, and and so and that's American culture, to be honest. That's American culture, and we need to separate ourselves from that, because in large respect California culture is different from that. Now, that's not to say that Californians are angels. There's no racism in California. There's no xenophobia in California, but by and large, I think that California values are different from American values in that we are a distinct society. And one of the things that make California a distinct society is the way that we treat and have give hospitality towards immigrants and people of minority groups.
You have another question? Would there be a citizenship requirement in the new California, Lewis?
Citizenship requirement for what? I'm not sure what the requirement would be.
Here's the official comment.
Okay.
This is from Stephanie Cage. Will there be citizenship requirements to move into or out of California? Would there also be a grandfather allowance?
So I like these kind of questions. However, I do want to preface them with the idea that I'm running for governor and not dictator, so I wouldn't be able to unilaterally make all the decisions myself. A lot of these types of questions would be answered by, collective dialogue with the legislature. Personally, to answer it from a personal point of view, what I would advocate for is that in the beginning, nothing changes. If you're an American citizen and on January, I would say December 31st, and California becomes an independent country on January 1st, you're still an American citizen and nothing changes. And I would even propose some kind of plan that says, your children also are automatically American citizens. So that if you, for example, maybe you're growing up in California your whole life and you're 25 years old, and then the next day California becomes an independent country and you had been planning to start a family and relying on the fact, in fact, not really even relying on the fact because you never thought about it, but you're just expecting that your children would be American citizens. And so I think that we would have to grandfather in not only the people who are alive today and allow them to maintain their American citizenship, but also their offspring and their children of the next generation, so that there's not a situation where people were, the next day after independence giving birth to Californians, and all of a sudden, for 9 months they thought they were going to have an American citizen child, and they don't. So I would advocate a position that protects citizenship for those who currently have it and extends it to their children as well.
Okay, any other questions for Lewis?
Yeah, what do we do? What do we do about the issue? It's not politically healthy to have a one-party rule, which we have here in California for the last 30 years. Democrats have been in control here. So what do we do to address this issue? We need to have some back and forth, and there's just one-party rule, Democrat rule here.
So I missed
it's not
the
healthy. It's authoritarian. It's a recipe for authoritarian state.
Sure. I missed the beginning of the question when you defined the issue. What was the issue that you said that you want to work on?
What do we do about one-party rule?
Oh, one-party rule. Okay.
Yeah.
So what we want to do in California is to get rid of the two-party system by allowing proportional representation in a legislature, so that third parties can be elected to represent the voters. Right now, we have a situation where we have the person with the most votes essentially wins, and everyone else is not represented. That is not a good situation because, even if you live in a very democratic neighborhood or a very democratic city, there's still, inevitably speaking, members of other political parties there who never get represented in Sacramento. Never. So that's Republicans. Those are members of the Green Party. Those are members of the Peace and Freedom Party, members of the California National Party that Marcus and I started back in 2015. There are a host of other parties. And I think it's important that everybody gets represented. So I would support proportional representation in the legislature so that third parties can have a chance to win. And if they're represented, then it's going to require, even if it was a Democratic Party that has the plurality, it would require them to create a coalition of parties in order to establish that majority government. And that would do a lot of damage towards one-party rule.
So is that more like a European parliamentary system?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it a European parliamentary system. I would just call it, a global parliamentary system, because that's what most countries around the world that are democratic employ. It's not just Europe. Australia has something like that. Even Russia has something like that. So it's not just European. This type of proportional representation is something that's employed around the world, and America, tries to claim itself as the brightest beacon for freedom in the world and the best example of democracy, and yet half the population, inevitably speaking, is not represented when one party or another is elected. Especially if you're talking about in close races where you have, 51-49 is the result of the election. Let's say a congressman gets elected from a district by 51% of the vote. 49% of the people in that district not represented. That's not democracy in my view. So if we had third parties, and it was elected on a proportional representation, then if there's 20% of the population, for example, is registered in the Green Party, then hopefully somewhere around 20% of the parliament would end up being members of the Green Party delegation. And if the population of California, for example, was 27% Republican, which I think it is about 27% Republican, then hopefully somewhere around 27%, maybe slightly less, maybe slightly more, would be members of the Republican delegation, so that Republicans have a voice in Congress or in the legislature, so that the members of the Green Party have a voice in the legislature, and not just the Democratic Party, which would be very successful at winning elections where it's first past the post.
If I could real quick, just want to show everybody something real quick. I think you'll all enjoy this. So one of the criticisms from the reporter on ABC7 was, whoa, you're not even in the country and you're running. Well, I introduce you John Huntsman. John Huntsman started his presidential campaign while in China and had people over here helping him out, and no one said anything. In fact, John Huntsman was in China from 2009 to 2011, resigned, and gave rumors that he would run president for 2012 in China. Then he immediately came out of China and ran for president. No one questioned him doing that at all.
Yeah, because that was in the stupid fake news narrative at the time. Now this is the stupid fake news narrative that everybody that goes against the establishment is somehow Russian.
John Huntsman also became the ambassador to Russia. Just a little fact. Sorry, Louis.
Well, yeah. I mean, when the powers that be don't like you, you all of a sudden become a Russian.
Yeah,
I've gone through that. Right now, they're doing it with Ted Cruz. I don't know what it is about. I just saw it, so I can't say it's justified or not. But the point of the matter is, I find it comical that the go-to slur of the day is, "Oh, you're Russian." I don't know why the people have such a problem with Russia. I mean, to make it where it's a slur to call you Russian. I mean, that's kind of, I think, a form of racism, isn't it? I mean, that must mean in some way that Russians are in some way something inherently bad. If it's a slur to call you Russian, so
they're recycling Cold War propaganda at this point. The propaganda is so stale and burned out that they have to recycle 30-year-old propaganda. It's beyond ridiculous.
Yeah, it is, and it's a shame because the United States and Russia have a good history up until the end of the Second World War, where Americans and Russians had a good history, worked together, were friends up until the end of the Second World War. Roosevelt and Stalin worked together in connection with the other allies to defeat the Nazis. And when they met in Germany, the Russians and the Soviets, I guess you would say, Soviets and the Americans, they were allies, working towards the same goal. And the Russians have played a role in defeating the Confederacy in the Civil War. So it's a shame that politics after the Second World War, businessmen and oligarchs and so on and so forth, have ruined that, because there's really no basis for this anti-Russian mentality in American society. Russians and Americans, I can attest to the fact, on a personal level, not talking about the government, Russians and Americans are very similar to one another. I've been living here in Russia for several years. Before this trip, I lived in Russia as a student. I have a Russian wife. I have a Russian child. So I certainly can speak to the point to the fact that Americans and Russians on a personal level are very similar to each other. And in fact, in Russia here, I maintain a column in a newspaper where I write in Russian about that very topic, and ways in which Russians and Americans are very similar, ways in which, as an American, when I came to Russia, I learned something new about Russia that contradicts the paradigm of what we're taught about Russia in American movies, where Russia is always portrayed as the antagonist, or in Russian news, where Russia is always portrayed as the antagonist. I mean, how many movies have you seen where someone, some rogue Russian military general is about to nuke the United States, or some Russian gangsters are doing something somewhere? It's always the Russians in the movies, in the news. It's the Russians. That's intentional. That's not accidental. That's intentional. So it's a shame. It really is a shame, because Russia is a great country. I love Russia. My family is part Russian, and it would be my goal, and one of the goals that we have at this California embassy, is to continue to build that relationship, or at least restore that relationship between the people of California and Russia, to maintain friendly relations between our two peoples. One of the most important things in that regard is interaction between cultures. Having Russians come to California, having Californians go to Russia. That's how we learn about each other. And when you know about each other because you learned about each other, you have nothing to be afraid of about one another. And that's why I support this multicultural exchange. It's part of the reason why I like living in Russia, because every day I learn something new about Russians that I didn't know before, and it directly contradicts everything that our culture in America has taught me.
And 1/3 of Californians are immigrants who routinely travel. 40% of Californians have passports, way beyond the average American thing. And when you add that together with our international linked economy, about half of us travel, speak foreign languages, go around the world. And that is so wildly different than the way things are in about 46 states. So I think Lewis represents California. And if people have a problem with him being in Russia, marrying Russians, speaking a foreign language,
marrying Russian, I don't have that many Russian wives.
Okay, but you get the idea. Like, if people are going to point this out,
he's in Russia marrying the Russians every day.
Like,
different
why
Russian.
don't you go pick on 40% of California? If you're going to listen to this, 40% of our state.
I appreciate that, and in some context, yeah, I guess I am some kind of representative, at least of this campaign to Russia. And so when you bring up John Huntsman, of course, he's an ambassador, so he's employed by the American government, and I'm not employed by a government, but I'm still representing a segment of the California population in Russia, where I represent and speak about California values and culture, and work specifically towards encouraging an international dialogue between those two populations that are so far apart from each other, but at the same time, they're very similar to one another.
So we're going to take one more question, and then I want to talk about the recall debate because we got some big progress on that, and it's coming up. One last question from Ahmad K. Will the cost of living in California go up after independence? Does the price of living in California go up once we gain independence, or is it the total opposite?
Well, I guess a third option would be that it wouldn't change to be more expensive or cheaper. I mean, maybe it wouldn't change at all. I think personally that the cost of living might go down in California. And the reason for that is because people's taxes would go down and fees would go down because we would be streamlining two massive governments into one massive government. And so, to be honest with you. So, I mean, at least one massive blocky government, bureaucratic government, is better than two. And so from that point of view, we're going to have streamlined California government, or the government that you have in your life. We're going to have one park service instead of two. You're going to have one tax franchise board instead of two. You're going to have one of each government service that we currently have two of. And so by doing that, we make the cost of government cheaper, and the amount of taxes that we need to collect lower. And then by reducing people's taxes and reducing people's fees, we make living in California cheaper.
So you're going to make complying with government more easy?
It's certainly going to be easier to comply with government because there's going to be one set of regulations as opposed to two. There's going to be one master instead of two. So, it's kind of a situation where a lot of times California law might contradict or, not fall directly in line with American law. And so you trying to please both masters. Well, we only have one federal government in Sacramento as opposed to one state government and one national government. And by definition, we have fewer regulations and fewer bars to jump over, or heaps and mounds to heap over in order to do what we want to do, whether it be business, getting a business license and meeting business requirements, paying taxes. I mean, just about every aspect of life right now, in some way or another, is somewhat controlled by both Washington and Sacramento. But if we can cut off Washington out of the equation, then I think that's going to do a lot towards reducing the presence of government in people's lives, which is something that I personally support. I want to get government out of people's lives and reduce the cost of running and maintaining California, which will then reduce the cost of living in California.
Just to back that up real quick, we have talked to many business owners. Not one business owner ever said, no, reducing regulations by 50% and not having to file a separate California and federal form wouldn't help my business. Of course it would. I have to hire people to file all that extra paperwork. And then there is the processing fees for that paperwork. So if I'm a business owner, I don't have to hire as much staff and I don't have to do as much and I can do more business. Not one business owner said Lewis was wrong in what he just said.
Well, anybody that does business knows that the administrative burden placed on that business by government takes up a lot of time where you could be spending that time making money, innovating, and doing things to further your business rather than complying with the lead weight around your neck that government puts.
Or you could be spending the time at home with your family instead
of there too. You could have a better life overall.
And when we tell people, hey, would you like to have state income taxes lowered, 20, 30%, maybe half, while all social services stay intact? Every single business owner says, yeah, that'd be great. So again, nobody's saying these are bad ideas. Everyone loves them. Question for you, Lewis, from Mike. Last question, then we'll be moving on. What about California national defense, the military? Mike wants to know.
Hi, Mike. Yeah, definitely California will need to have a national defense budget, the military, to protect ourselves in North America. But we also, if we are going to have the opportunity, and I really think it's an opportunity to start from scratch here, because right now we have a situation where we live in a country where we spend $800 billion or $700 billion every year in defense, because that's what we've always been doing, since the end of World War II. So we've always been spending so much money on building more and more weapons of war. And I think if California became an independent country, we could examine where our priorities are. And I doubt that they would be investing so much in weapons of war, which means that we could say, okay, what do we need as a country to defend ourselves in North America? Well, we don't live in an age anymore where countries are crossing the oceans in ships and frigates to invade the beachhead anymore. So, we still, of course, would need to have a national defense policy, but we could have a budget to protect ourselves in North America that would be comparable to Canada, to comparable to Mexico, comparable to even European countries. If we had in California a national defense budget that was even average of the global defense budget of countries around the world, average country around the world spends about 25 to 27 billion dollars a year on defense. 25 to 27. The United States spends over 600 billion. It's greater than the next 10 countries combined. California, of course, wouldn't need that much. Wouldn't need to spend 600 billion. Wouldn't need to spend 300 billion. Wouldn't need to spend 100 billion. It wouldn't need to spend 80 billion like Russia does. Russia's 40 times larger than California. So if California had a national budget that was average, say like Australia, we would be able to defend ourselves in North America. We would spend about $25 billion a year on that, and we would save as a result tens of billions of dollars a year, each year, that we could then redirect towards other programs that we actually care about in California: education, infrastructure, healthcare, and some of the programs that I'm proposing in my campaign, such as extending maternity leave so that newborn children can be with their mother for a year without the mother having to worry about her finances because she'll be paid for a year of maternity. Those type of programs will cost money. How can we pay for them? Well, if I was a typical Democrat in Sacramento, I'd say, let's raise your taxes.
Yeah.
I'm not. So what I'm doing is saying, let's stop paying federal taxes to Washington. Keep California taxes in California. Stop paying for America's foreign military interests. And then with the money we save by doing that, we can reinvest in other directions that the people of California care about more than war and more than Alabama.
So what do we do with the federal military bases that are already established in California?
So there are several military bases in California, and I think that at least initially, we're going to have to create some military base agreements with the Americans so that they can maintain their presence in California. Just as we, as Americans, we signed military base agreements in Germany and Japan and Korea, everywhere where the United States has one of its 900 military bases around the world located, there's an associated military base agreement where the United States pays money towards the host country, whether it be in Africa or Europe or Asia, to allow the Americans to maintain their military presence there. And so we could do something very similar to that. I mean, we're not going to, like I always say, we're not seceding from the earth. We're still going to be in North America. The Americans are still going to be our brethren, and we can continue to work with them. And if they want to pay to lease the land where their bases are currently located, then that's another source of income for the people of California to invest in all of the things that we want to pay for while lowering our taxes and paying down our debt.
Good answer.
It was F.H. Buckley in the book American Secession, who said that, yes, Francis H. Buckley, professor of the Antonin Scalia Law School, George Mason University, as well as an editor for American Spectator. The American Secession, the looming threat of national breakup, said that California, if it wasn't supporting the American military and just had a military budget equivalent to like Canada or Israel, it would have so much surplus left over. This is aside from the donor state. Just, you don't fund the U.S. military like you used to. You just fund it for basically the defense. You'd have so much money left over, you could instantly create a single-payer healthcare with no taxes raised and no diversion of funds.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're talking about, because the people of California, if you give them a choice between let's spend tens of billions of dollars a year on weapons of war, or let's spend tens of billions of dollars on universal health care, even if you're not a supporter of universal health care, probably I think you're going to choose the healthcare option if you're in California. And so we don't have to devote that money towards universal health care. We could. That's the option that California is given through independence. Right now, we have no choice. Right now, we pay 13% of the federal budget. That money then gets spent on the American bloated military budget. But as an independent country, we spend much less on military, much less on weaponry, and we can then use that surplus that we get from reducing that budget on other items. whether it be infrastructure, education, or healthcare, or beyond.
Okay, I think we're out of. If you have any other questions, send them in. Right now, I would like to cover the recall debate that's coming up real quick. So let me show you all a couple things here. Let me share screen. Okay, so hopefully this is showing. We are going to have a recall debate on May 30th. These candidates have announced they're going to participate: Nicholas Wildstar, Chauncey Killens, Hilary Fuji Shiota, Louis Marinelli, Armando Mondo Perez. In addition, there's a Dr. Hennick, I think, who might be interested, and Dakota Vaughn might also be interested. So the debate's coming May 30th. Nicholas Wildstar, Chauncey Killens, Hilary Fuji Shiota, Louis Marinelli, Armando Perez, in addition to maybe 2 or 3 more candidates, may also come. Let me also show you this real quick, if I may. We also have created this graphic that we're going to try to use to promote the debates. We based it off a ABC presidential debate graphic and used kind of a similar format. It's supposed to be like the California flag, rippling with some imagery popping out in front of it. So very pleased with that. We'll be using that to showcase the recall candidates debate. Questions will be coming out. Any thoughts or comments on the recall candidates debate?
I think it exposes the fraud of the mainstream because all they're gonna force feed us Newsom, Faulkner, Cox, and maybe Caitlyn Jenner, and that's what the mainstream's gonna force feed us. And we don't even, if you're in the mainstream, you don't even get to hear any of these alternative candidates. So I think our campaign here exposes the fraud of the mainstream as being not really the voice of the people, as being the voice of the establishment. And this debate right here that you guys are putting on next week proves that.
Yeah, I think it's great if we have an opportunity to allow Californians to hear from the other candidates in the race and not, as Sam was saying, just the ones that the mainstream media wants you to know about. Because if Gavin Newsom is put up against Kevin Faulkner or John Cox, then of course Gavin Newsom is going to win. But if Gavin Newsom is put up against the question of independence, all of a sudden, it's never been done before, and I think they're scared of what will happen. And that's why, you know, there may be some resistance to putting other candidates on the platform, giving them a platform to speak, because they're afraid of people presenting new ideas that could actually challenge the status quo and give the voters something to think about and consider and maybe try by voting for them.
That's the major problem. We can't even have a real debate. We have to follow some fake narrative debate, and it's just beyond ridiculous because they're scared if we talk about some alternative narrative that they will fall on their face for all the lies that they tell, because all they are is a giant lie.
We'll have a debate. We will have a conversation. I certainly hope it will be a debate so that it's an opportunity for not only the people of California to hear from some alternative candidates, but also for the candidates to challenge each other as to why they are better than one of the other candidates. I mean, it is, after all, hopefully a debate.
I would like to. Sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, I would like to point out for our viewers that our debate is kind of an anti-debate where, presidential election or whatever election in the United States of America, it's a very corporate thing. You get a 2-hour debate slot on primetime television. 3/4 of that time is commercials. the candidates don't make the money off the commercials. That's, you know, the debate host, right? The station running the debate. For us, we're not doing this for money. We're doing this because we're Californians. We actually care about California, and we actually care about these issues that we all as Californians are facing. For us, it's not like there is no question of, do we charge candidates to attend? Do we, you know, put some sort of monetary limitation? Oh, your candidacy must raise at least this much to be able to qualify as a valid candidate in our eyes, right? It speaks to this whole, you know, control the narrative. You're only going to hear from the people we want you to hear from. And then, you know, we'll only let you hear maybe 20 minutes worth of them saying things. And then the other thing I got to point out is like the question. Usually in America, in elections, candidates aren't asked really tough questions. They're asked kind of middle of the road questions or very easy questions. And for us, because we're all about California and California issues, and we really, really, really care about California getting the best possible choice that we can, we are actually going to be asking some very deep questions, some very serious, real questions. And it's not going to be gotcha questions. It's not, you know, oh, well, you know, to use you as an example, Lewis, you know, there's not going to be a, okay, well, we'll ask Lewis, oh, what's it like living in Russia? And then we'll ask Mr. Newsom, you know, how unfair has this recall been, right? That's a totally unfair line of questioning that I think is actually feasible to think that that would come out of the mainstream corporate run, air quotes, debate.
Just for the record, I have no problem with talking about how life in Russia is.
Oh yeah.
Great. Very Russian.
How is it having a direct line with Putin there, Lewis?
Oh my God.
Well, actually, it's not quite a direct line because there's when you call Putin, he doesn't pick up the phone himself. He has this yellowish kind of rotary phone in his office, and an aide answers it, and then he gives the phone to Putin, and Putin will take the call. That's how it works.
And we would know because we received millions of dollars from the Russian government. Additionally, the Mueller report said that there's definitive proof that American citizens were involved in collusion with the Russian government. The Senate and House Select Intelligence Committee, reviewing all of the emails, definitively showed, yes, California was in collusion with the Russian government. And the California Fair Political Practices Commission did subpoena our bank accounts and found a direct pipeline of money from the Kremlin to us. Oh, wait. All three of those investigations showed the exact total opposite. My bad.
Well. I thought I had a good story there. With the yellow rotary phone, I thought I was sounding pretty convincible.
So, Lewis will take any question. Lewis will take anything you want, and we can cover anything. And while we're running this as a real candidate, because this is historic, as Lewis was saying, and this is the reason why I love this idea and was like, you got to do this. If he qualifies, it says in the race, candidate for independence in a government document. That's never happened before in 150 years or ever. There has never been a time where the California government in an official election printed or accepted that there were any candidates who said they were for independence. That gets done, that's historic. And the reason that we know that's significant is because we did it with the assembly elections. The fact is that in 2015, because Lewis was running for assembly, we got 2 LA Times articles, half page. And we made the SAC-B and San Francisco TV and San Diego TV. I remember one day I was talking to Jason, I think, and we were on San Diego and Sacramento TV on the same day, and I didn't know either was airing. That was before Trump. That was before we got really big. And the only reason they were paying attention to it was there was a quality candidate, a real life thinking, good candidate, filled everything out, saying, I'm running as an independence activist. And we actually, Lewis got the California government to type out on a government form, California independence. That was historic. That was the first time that ever happened.
It was on the ballot, first time on a ballot, because you get to choose a ballot designation title for yourself. And the only thing that they require and they kind of manage and regulate is that it's appropriate for the candidate. So, for example, I couldn't put up there something like, high school teacher if I'm not a high school teacher. And so the title ballot designation that you choose for yourself has to represent what you do in your life. And so when we chose California Independence Leader, it was verifiable that I was traveling around the state, campaigning around the state, talking about secession. And I had been doing that for a long time. That's the majority of my day-to-day tasks was that. And so they cleared it. And for the first time in history, there was a candidate whose ballot designation was directly related to California independence. And that will happen again in this election because I will qualify for the ballot, and it will be written under my name that I am a supporter or advocate for Calexit. People around the world know what Calexit is, and so therefore a vote for me is a vote for Calexit. There was a question I saw that came in from Mike asking if we have filed. Yes, we have sent in both the candidate intention statement as well as the recipient committee statement, which establishes a recipient committee for raising funds. So yes, we are among those candidates who have sent in their paperwork to be official candidates in this race. The next step will be to qualify by collecting some signatures for my nomination. And when the time comes, we're going to be filing the filing fee, paying the filing fee, and then you will have a de facto referendum on California independence this fall.
Also for Mike, it will be broadcast live here at StreamYard. So this same platform, there's a link. We're going to be giving out the link to all the candidates, and they'll be able to participate. But everybody who goes to the Yes California YouTube page will be able to type in comments, and we'll feed them in just like here. So people are on.
I got a question, Marcus. How many different platforms does StreamYard allow? I've never used that software. How many different platforms does that allow you to stream on simultaneously?
Nick Wildstar is the expert on that. I think it's unlimited, or like something like 20 or 30, some ridiculous amount.
Well, I got apparently I'm good on YouTube again, so I want to donate my YouTube channel and also my my Odyssey channel. I have streaming capabilities on both those channels, so I'd like to spread the word on those two channels is what I could offer to you for this debate.
Yeah, if anybody wants to be part of distributing the debate, that's wonderful. What you have to do is you go into your Google, because YouTube's owned by Google, and you would basically change your permission settings. Or no, you would allow me, Marcus.Ruiz.Evans, permission as, I think, an editor type 2. Not type 1, editor type 2, which means I don't have any control over your channel. I can't remove videos or post videos, but I can stream to your channel. So it's a safe way I can't mess with anything, but we can stream to your channel. Devil War, I want Calexit, so do I. Let's go California independence. Let me show you some of the questions we were going to cover real quick, if I may, just so you can see those. Let me pull that up. And okay, 1 second. The computer's a little bit of an issue. Let's see if we can get around that. Okay. Yes, here we go. Okay.
I can play some piano while we wait.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I'm
Okay.
gonna bust out some Ode de Joy and Fur Elise.
So the recall candidates debate, the first one of the series, will be held May 30th from 2 to 4. Every recall candidate just got this email, and you're literally seeing it. This is the time most candidates choose. Here's the link. They'll click on this to join. Everybody else can join through going to YouTube. Here are the candidates that agreed with their websites. And here are the questions. And then we showed his contact information, and then we also gave a link to the last recall debate so they can see exactly what the format is. So no tricks, nothing. It's very straightforward. The first question right now. By the way, we want to have a series, so we need more debate questions. If you have debate questions, you think, boy, these are the things to ask, please send them in. We want to have a series. We want to keep asking questions. A lot of people are interested. Nobody else is doing a debate of the candidates. Nobody else is making sure Californians understand what the candidates are and what the options are and how they think. We're the only ones doing this tool and duty of democracy in California, and we're proud to do that. Please send us in some more questions. Here are the top 6 questions.
Wait, Marcus. If you
Sure.
I'm trying not to read it because I don't personally believe the candidates should know the questions before the debate. So if you're about to go through and read them, maybe I'll go to bed now. I don't know. I just think that
Donna Brazil gave him to Hillary, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, so
I don't know. I think that the candidates should not know the questions beforehand. It's
they gave him to Hillary, and everybody loved it.
Everybody a week to come up with some kind of perfect answer, and it's not really a true answer if it's going to be it's practiced over.
Would you say that's cheating, Lewis?
I would say that it's not really a debate if everyone's going to be able to be there with prepared statements just to parrot out of their mouths if they've been practicing in front of the mirror for the last week.
Mike has a question. Are we going to have a press release or announcing it? Now that we have the debate and we have the graphic, I'd like to send some sort of publicity saying we're doing this specifically for this reason. If we promote it, more people come. More people come, more people paying attention, more attention for all the candidates. So
are you going to invite any of the mainstream media to show them how to do their job?
Well, what I'd like to do is
I'd like to send propagandists how to do their job.
Well, Marcus, I'll send out a press release to the Marinelli for Governor campaign to say that I've accepted to participate in the debate, and we'll see if we'll share that through our network and see what happens.
See if they cover it.
Yeah, I'd like to do a mass email saying you're going, here are the other candidates. So it's a real life debate. We don't have to list the questions, but at least list the candidates and the graphic showing it's a real life debate. We're actually doing this. And real life Californians who are serious candidates saw our first debate, felt we did a fair job, and are showing up. I'll get that to you a little bit later. We'll work from there.
So yeah, in the spirit of it being a real debate, that's what I mean. Like when I say, the candidates shouldn't know the questions beforehand. I don't think that maybe we can arrange this details for the next debate, but I think giving a candidate 3 minutes to answer a question is going to, especially if there's 5 or 6 candidates, it's going to have some people sitting there for 20 minutes before they're speaking. So maybe we can reduce it to a minute of speaking, because inevitably speaking, we want to have as many viewers as possible and have them get as much information as possible from the debate. And if they tune in and somebody's talking for 3 minutes and it's only one person, they're likely to turn it off. So the more that you can get some dynamic going on between, move from question to question and allow the candidates a limited amount of time to, of course, give a full, complete answer, but not a 3-minute statement. I think is a little bit too long. That's what my suggestion would be for maybe the next debate, so that there's more time for more questions, shorter answers, and then more dynamics between the candidates, because that'll make it more interesting and more of a real debate.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that. So please send us suggestions. We want it. This is a series. We're basing this debate off the last one that we did. So it's easy to show people, here's what we did. We're going to recreate that. And they go, oh, okay, I feel comfortable. But we should be more dynamic. So absolutely, suggestions, new questions. How do we switch?
Do we know when the date of the election is going to be?
No.
We don't know the date yet. Who sets that date? The Secretary of State?
I think so. I'm not sure, but I know that I recently saw on Twitter a California state senator was posting a tweet saying that he believes an early election should be called, specifically because Gavin Newsom seems to be recovering in the polls right now. And so he was saying, we need to have a recall election as soon as possible because Gavin Newsom is recovering in the polls right now, and we don't want to give the opposition or the opponents any extra time for luck to happen and him to fall back down in the polls if there's a virus strain or there's a forest fire or some other disaster happens. He was specifically openly calling for a fast recall election to happen, specifically because, well, the time seems well for Mr. Newsom right now, who seems to be recovering in the polls, which I would say he's recovering in the polls because when people signed the petition to have him be recalled, they had reason to do so. And now when they see that the recall has been qualified, they're looking at who the alternatives are, and they're seeing John Cox, they're seeing Kevin Faulconer, and they're not interested. Well, wait until they hear that they can vote for Calexit, and they will be interested. And the interest in recalling Newsom will go up because people will know that voting yes on recall is yes on independence. And that is something that will, I think, affect the public opinion and in such a way that there will be a larger number of people who support the recall.
Let me show you this real quick. So this is at least one of the questions is based upon. I won't mention that questions, but at least this is some data for everybody to take a look at. So there's a lot of talk about how only 36% of the public is supporting the recall. That comes from this one poll. So I am always curious whenever they go, hey, everybody, look, definitive fact, and it's one poll. Like when we talked about Calexit, there was 2 polls making that radical statement. This is just one. So that's a red flag for me. And all of the news is talking about only 36%. Well, they're all referring to one poll that just came out. That's not very credible, but okay. But here's where it gets interesting. Gotta read, buried.
What was the sample size on that poll, Marcus?
I don't know offhand.
I think polls have been thoroughly discredited over the last 5 years of political polling. I mean, it's I think they've been thoroughly discredited, but that's just my opinion.
I don't have the sample size, but here it is. Between about 5,000 voters. What I would like to point out to everybody is this statistic not being covered by the news at all. So the news is saying, wow, 36% of the voters are interested in the recall. The news is saying, wow, Gavin Newsom's approval rating is going up. Here's what they're not pointing out. His approval rating was at 64%. It's now at 52%. In January, his disapproval rating was at 48% versus 46%. So in January, more people hated Governor Newsom than liked him. You will not see that anywhere in the news. They're just going to say Republicans didn't like him. Actually, it was a majority of all voters. So January 2020, more voters didn't like Newsom than liked him. You won't see that in the news. Newsom has rebounded to 52% or barely over half. Another thing not mentioned, they're only going to say he has majority support. They're not going to say he has only 52%, and they're not going to say that he has lost 12 percentage points from his high. So he went to where more voters hated than liked him. He had 64%. He is still 12 points lower than his high, and he barely has over half. That comes from this survey. What you are going to hear them talk about is none of that, and just 36% want the recall, which I find very interesting. Why won't the news mention that more voters hated him than liked him? About the fact that he's still 12 points behind. How come they won't mention the fact that he barely over has half the majority? And why in the same poll will they mention none of those things and then talk about only 36% want the recall? Interesting. I find that interesting that those facts aren't mentioned at all.
Because you can't spin your fake news narrative if you put things in context, Marcus. That's why.
So, Lewis, any thoughts, comments on that? You don't have to.
I mean, like I said, he's rebounding in the polls because in January the collection effort for the recall was still underway. People were still upset. Now it's been qualified, so now people are looking at the alternatives and they don't like what they see. So I think they're reverting back to what they have. Because they have Gavin Newsom. They may be upset with Gavin Newsom for several different reasons. But then when they look at the alternatives, they understand that that's not necessarily any better. And so they're probably saying, well, I'll just support Gavin Newsom because look at these people who want to replace him. Well, they don't know about this campaign yet. They don't know about the fact that Calexit is on the ballot. And when they do, and they're given a choice between Gavin Newsom and the status quo, the continuation of one-party rule, and the continuation of the politics of the last 20, 30 years in California, and a new path for California as an independent country, a declaration of independence from a sitting governor, affirmed by the state legislature, and then put before the people in a plebiscite, a referendum for independence, to delegitimize American dominion over California in the same way as the Norwegians did it with Sweden. That is historic, as Jason pointed out to me recently, the Norwegian example. And so that is historic. That is something that will pique interest and get people to say, well, we're recalling Gavin Newsom because we wanted change. We looked at the ballot options and we didn't like the change options. Well, this one I do like. So now when they're asked again, having known about Calexit option, whether or not they support the recall, knowing that voting yes on recall means voting yes on independence, that's a third of Californians right there will say yes.
Let me tell you, I've seen Kevin Faulconer speak in person. He is not impressive at all. Not impressive. Kevin Faulconer sucks, honestly.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, I haven't watched him or his videos, but I'm telling you right now, people were upset by Gavin Newsom. They weren't impressed by the alternatives to him, so they're reverting back to what they're comfortable with, or what they currently have. But when they see that they have an opportunity to vote for independence, they're going to change their minds right back to supporting the recall and voting yes on recall, because yes on recall means yes on independence.
I'd like to point out that, Mr. Newsom's net worth has gone up by the millions during Corona. Millions! Not that he wasn't already worth millions, because he was, but somehow a lot of COVID relief made it over his way. Millions of dollars worth. Not specifically to him, to companies he owns.
Well, he never shut his businesses down.
Yeah, I was gonna get to that. He possibly embezzled funds. He was hypocritical with do as I say, not as I do, French laundry, don't let your kids go to school. It's not safe for them, but I'll let my kids go to school because it's safe for them.
Plump Jack Winery. Okay, I work specifically in the winery industry, and my winery had to shut down while his stayed open. Okay, so that's beyond ridiculous.
Yeah, and as far as I know, wineries and winery staff are not actually considered essential workers. Yet, as Sam just pointed out, certain persons' wineries got to stay open while everyone else had to close down.
Yeah.
Californians are sick and tired of hypocrisy, especially from our government.
Yeah, and Jason, that type of hypocrisy, of course, is what people don't want anymore. But when you're faced with, okay, we can deal with the hypocrisy, or we can deal with these, John Cox or Kevin Faulkner, that kind of thing. I think they're going to go with the hypocrisy. And that's why I think his poll numbers are starting to go back up.
Newsom is better looking than both those other two candidates. Way better looking man.
Yeah, and I was gonna continue on and point that out, Lewis, is that Newsom's favorability was going down, 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 and all of a sudden, as signatures are getting counted, and it looks like this recall might end up going through, he's started lifting mandates on this, that, and the other. Okay, people are unhappy that we're locked down so much. Okay, we'll start easing the lockdown. People are unhappy about this. Okay, we'll go ahead and pander to them on that. But this is totally not for political reasons. There is no political motivation behind this. It's just science, right? A flat out lie. It does not take a rocket scientist. Like, basic math can put that 2 and 2 together.
Yeah.
Then we, as you pointed out, are left seeing from the mainstream narrative, supposedly we've got one hypocritical, person saying, oh yes, I am pro-trans rights, and then going and saying quite literally the opposite. We have, the guy who's in charge and all his hypocrisy. We've got people saying that they're for, more sane, reasonable spending from the state, right? And then they go and spend $5 million renting a freaking bear. If I had $5 million right now, I guarantee you the last thing I would do is rent an animal. Because, it's the pandemic and there are plenty of people who are hurting.
Is that how much Cox paid for that bear?
That's the number that I keep hearing.
That's an expensive bear, man.
Well, yeah, he's a paid actor. He's a professional show bear.
Wow. Okay. I should have been a bear, man. Could make a lot better living over here.
So here's the other part of it real quick, is that we're not hearing about the Calexit candidate. We're not hearing about gubernatorial candidate Wildstar, who very well could be California's first black governor. California's never had someone of black skin color as our governor. Are you freaking kidding me, California? Come on.
Real quick about him, the platform, our main platform that we're on, so I don't get censored, told me in a previous interview with Nicholas Wildstar that he's not even a real candidate, that he's an imposter posing as someone that's running as governor.
Yeah, and so there's all this false narrative coming out that, it leaves this big boulder that we're up against. And rather than try and all get together and push this boulder and try and budge it an inch. What we're having to do here is host our own debate, do all of this ourselves, become the platform that operates in a way that the other guys should be operating on. They don't, but they should be. And that means instead of spending all our effort trying to move this boulder, we're going to circumnavigate. We're going around it. And only by doing this can we really stand a chance as Californians at really hearing from all of the candidates, getting a really clear picture of who's who and who stands for what, so that we can then come to the best informed decision possible for California. And I would like to say that's our goal. That's pretty clear that the mainstream narrative is the antithesis of that. They don't want Californians educated on who the candidates are and what they stand for. They don't want candidates to make the best possible decision. They want candidates to listen to them, accept their narrative on who should be the guy. Also, I'd like to point out that, some average Joe white guy just haphazardly says he's gonna run, and mainstream starts covering him. But here, two actually viable candidates. I mean, Lewis, thank God you were able to get that interview, because from what I've been seeing with Mr. Wildstar, like, it kind of doesn't matter how hard we're trying. There is a whole lot of push working against that man. And I think it says a lot about mainstream media narrative. Most likely having some sort of racially based discrimination. Maybe that's just my opinion, but I've been looking at it, I've been analyzing it, and this kind of the only conclusion I can really come to is, I mean, why wouldn't they talk about the black guy who wants to lower taxes and do right by California? Because they know how popular that's gonna be. They know.
Because he's not pushing a big social justice warrior message. He's pushing a more libertarian message, and we can't have that because of the color of his skin. We can't have that. That goes counter narrative right there.
So if I may, 5 minutes and then we're wrapping up the show. It's 2:00. It's a little bit late, and I have 2 videos to show, but I'll show them after the 5 minutes. So 5 more minutes, and then we're going to wrap up the show, and I have a couple videos to show. So any comments anyone wants to make?
I gotta go now though. So nice talking to you all. I'll see you at the next call or at the debate, whatever one comes first. And have a nice day. And remember to promote the idea that yes on recall is yes on Calexit. How do I'll leave.
Okay.
That's it. Bye-bye.
Okay. Any other comments from anyone else as we wrap up the show? Okay, private chat. Let's see. Be right back. Okay. Okay, then that was the conclusion of our show. I'm going to show 2 things now that we did. We can discuss them next show simply because it's 3 hours and my brain blanks out after. So yeah, sorry. So let me show you a couple things we've been doing. Jason, any last minute comments?
No, I'm good. I guess maybe I'd just like to say, everyone, keep your minds open. Use that brain that you've been gifted. We all have one up inside of our heads. Use that brain, use those eyes, use those ears. use that tongue, right? Get educated on issues and on candidates. Come to your own conclusions. Don't let people tell you what to do or who to vote for, right? If you want Calexit and you want Louis Marinelli as the governor, then vote for what you want. Don't do it because someone else says. Don't do it because of pandering and, oh, well, hey, now the lockdown's over and we're all getting $600, so guess everything's okay now. Use your own tools to make your decision and come to the best possible decision you can, all of us, because all of us are counting on one another to do this.
Okay. Any last minute comments from anyone about anything? Okay. I'm going to show 2 videos. I'm asking, please, no comments. I'm a little bit, show's over. I got to do these things because they're major projects. We had a great discussion on recall candidates and talking to Louis, and I wanted to give time to that, but I do have to show these things. I'm asking for no commentary. Let me just show them. If you want to discuss it, we'll discuss it next show because I got to get going. But I promised people I would show this. They're major projects, and let's get right to it. So first thing we're doing, okay. So we had a presentation with the Pomo Indigenous recently, and it went very well. So this is, there was me, Jason was there. Jason did a lot of the research. We were talking about Tule elk and the ability of the Pomo to have Tule elk in their area. Let me see if I can find one that's specifically the map. So this is a presentation. It's available. I'll post this up in private chat here in a second, but basically it was with real live Pomo Indigenous people, and we covered Tule elk in their area, and they were very, very appreciative. I'll send the link. You can hear them speaking. This was Julina Acosta's idea. She's a Calexit Congress member and an Indigenous person from Pomo territory. She wanted to have a presentation requested from Yes California while she was in the driver's seat to talk about how to introduce Tule elk to the Pomo Indigenous area in a way that aligned with California law. Jason was instrumental in packaging a lot of that information together, and we are very pleased to have been able to have the first Yes California, fully independent Yes California project helping a California Indigenous tribe with achieving social justice in a way that's important to them. I will post that up. That's a big development. Just wanted to make sure to cover that. Secondly, I'm going to play this one in full. This is a project between Movimiento de Independencia de Baja California, or Baja Independence, the Baja Secession Movement, worked with Yes California to make a joint publicity commercial. The idea was sponsored by Quatemec Morgan. The scripting was modified by myself, Marcus Ruiz-Evans, along with Robert Stark and Jason Wright. Jason Wright did a lot of the final scripting, and we fed that back to Quatemec, and then he made this. This is a joint product between the Baja Independence Movement of Mexico and California Independence. Let's take a look.
Yes, California recognizes that we Californians have a common origin with the rest of Baja Peninsula. For a very long time, all of Baja and current-day California were one nation, independent from Mexico and America from 1836 to 1846, for as long as Texas was declared an independent nation, that Texans to this day still universally refer to with pride. For longer than we have been divided governments, we were historically a single people, and with a universal culture that appreciated and abounded with diversity far beyond the levels found in Mexico or America. Today, this difference in culture between Baja and the rest of Mexico and California and the rest of America is still as strong as it was over a century before. Both of our regions are still culturally distinct from our captive nations. Yes, California salutes the inhabitants of Baja, California, its peninsula, and we say yes to the unification between California and Baja California. But this must be done in a way that results in the full buy-in of the majority of both of our peoples. So any unification will be done. In order to do this and to secure a peaceful transition to independence, we must go through an orderly process of negotiation between our governors after our regions have held a successful vote for independence from Mexico, held in Baja, and a vote for independence from America, held in California. Our current governors between both regions of Baja and California have met in recent years and have already established friendly working relationships, which we hope to continue. We encourage and believe that the next governors of Baja South and North and California will also have productive, continued friendly relationships like the predecessors. Additionally, international law says that a vote of the people showing there is a legitimate request to secede must come first before any negotiations. Given these realities, we at Yes California feel that holding separate votes first and then encouraging dialogue amongst our elected leaders is the most appropriate and most realistic path for the unified California, a growing California that can last and be supported by a majority of the people on both sides of this country. Yes, California will encourage our governors to meet immediately once that vote is held to begin negotiations for the largest reunification the North has ever seen since East Germany emerged, which will create the most prosperous region in the entire Pacific. We are one California. Our origin comes from old California. Our destiny is an independent California. We come from the same roots and we are united by history. And today, we are ready to unify into a great nation and to bring welfare and good government to all of the families as never before.
So we didn't say automatic reunification. What we said was separate votes will be held. The elected sorry, 1 second. Let me. Okay. We said that separate votes would be held. Elected officials chosen by those people would enter into negotiation, meaning that it would be up to those separate peoples, since they chose those elected officials and voted for independence, to choose those terms. We said that we hoped there would be negotiation between the elected officials, but of course, we defer to the will of California voters. It will be up to Californians if this happens or not. We're simply saying that we believe negotiation would be a good idea, and we hope that it happens because of a shared history. And that's all we said. We didn't say tear down the wall and let's all be one immediately. Never said anything like that. So before people freak out, I want you to know the actual context. We'll leave it there. I understand people have comments. I got to go. It's 3 hours. So we will do comments next week on these issues and go from there. Thank you all for being here. And as always, join us every Sunday at 11 live.
And thank you for tuning in, and stay safe.
Stay safe.